rights violations brought on in the second Trump administration. It's all ahead in the second hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump hosts Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney today at the White House. As Dan Karpenchuk reports from Toronto, Trump and Carney are expected to discuss tariffs and security.
Carney was elected mainly on his campaign of being the best leader to deal with Trump. The two have already had a couple of phone conversations described as positive. Now, as Carney is set to arrive at the White House, some analysts are concerned that he set the right tone, a diplomatic balancing act, where he and Trump can find common ground, while Carney holds firm on Canadian sovereignty. They fear the specter of the dressing down of President Volodymyr Zelensky when he visited the White House. Carney has already said the focus of the talks will be tariffs as well as the future economic and security relationship. It's a high-stakes meeting for Carney, who must stand up for Canada, but walk a fine line in how he does it. For NPR News, I'm Dan Karpenchuk in Toronto.
Veterans groups in the U.S. say a Republican-backed budget bill now moving through Congress includes a dangerous loophole. The bill outlines President Trump's domestic policy priorities, but one change would make GI benefits more accessible to for-profit schools. NPR's Quill Lawrence explains.
The Republican policy bill working its way through Congress currently includes a repeal of the 90-10 rule that says for-profit schools can get no more than 90% of their revenue from federal funding. It's a market test to make sure at least 10% of students would pay their own money to go. For years, though, there was a loophole. GI Bill benefits were counted in that 10%. That meant for-profit schools aggressively targeted veterans for enrollment, including so-called diploma mills that drained veterans' benefits without providing a useful degree. Legislation finally closed that loophole in 2023, but veterans advocacy groups are flagging a line in the current Republican draft bill that would eliminate the 90-10 rule altogether. Quill Lawrence, NPR News.
The number of Americans working full-time as digital creators skyrocketed in 2024. NPR's Windsor Johnston reports they now make up the largest and fastest-growing share of Internet-dependent jobs in the U.S.
A new study by the Interactive Advertising Bureau shows that full-time creator jobs have grown sevenfold in just 4 years. Amani Cheers is with the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. She says what was once seen as a side hustle has grown into a viable career for an increasing number of Americans.
Everything from short videos about food, about fitness, about fashion is really leading people into a space that not only can be incredibly lucrative personally, but has created a whole influencer culture.
The study shows there are nearly 29 million jobs that depend on the internet, but it's the creator economy that's fueling the biggest boom. Windsor Johnston, NPR News.
On Wall Street, the Dow was down about 140 points. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Former Labor Secretary and former Boston Mayor Marty Walsh has weighed in on what he thinks the Democratic Party needs to do to get its mojo back. During an interview on the People's Cabinet, a podcast hosted by his former Chief of Staff, Dan Coe, Walsh said Democrats need to get back to talking to people, not in town halls, but in coffee shops and other places within their communities. He says Democrats should be going to their constituents rather than the other way around. His recommendation to current elected officials is to think about their first political race and what issues voters wanted solved. The deadline to get a Massachusetts Real ID necessary to fly domestically or get into many government buildings is tomorrow. For those who still need the ID, the Massachusetts RMV is accepting walk-in transactions at all of its service centers. The advice, though, is to get to an RMV office early as they fill up fast. For those who haven't yet gotten a Real ID, RMV officials say there's no need to panic because up to and beyond May 7th, the registry will continue to process Real ID transactions. But do check your license. If it has that little gold star, it means you already have a Real ID and you're good to go. And certain AAA locations have them, but you do need an appointment to get in. Red Sox host Texas at Fenway tonight. It's a 6:45 start. Scattered showers today, could be heavy at times, high in the 60s. We're at 61 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One with the Capital One Saver Card. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
Yes, from Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Thank you. Senator Ed Markey is going to zoom in at noontime, and we're going to be joined by the Governor of the Commonwealth this Friday and the Attorney General of the Commonwealth on May 13th. And the man who's challenging Mayor Wu to become the next mayor of Boston, Josh Kraft, is going to join us. We're here at the library, I believe.
Here at the library, yep.
On May 13th. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there. You know, you were a little late yesterday, as we discussed several times. I assume you were getting your real ID yesterday?
No, but I got to get one soon.
Tomorrow's deadline. You know that.
Yeah.
Just don't go anywhere.
Well, you can't fly anywhere.
Well, you could, actually, if you have a passport.
You can still drive in the Mass Pike.
That is
just don't want to scare anybody.
Well, you've really done your research, haven't you?
I know I can still drive. I just can't take off in an airplane.
So anti-war protests have a long history on American college campuses, but with Trump's crackdown of political dissidents and pro-Palestinian organizers, the Quad feels a lot quieter 2 years into the war in Gaza than in late 2023. Rümeysa Öztürk, who we're going to discuss a couple times today, has been in ICE custody for 6 weeks for the, quote, crime of co-authoring an op-ed in the Tufts Daily. Others who have spoken out in support of Palestinians and against war have been challenged not only by the Trump administration, but in many cases by their own campus officials. So has our speech already been chilled to a dangerous level? I think the answer is clear. You know, we here on Boston Public Radio haven't done a check-in about the war in Gaza for far too long. The UN says 90% of the population there is reliant on humanitarian aid to survive. After breaking a strenuous ceasefire months ago, Israel has been engaged in a complete blockade of all humanitarian aid, water, medicine, food, all aid for more than 50 days. And the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, this week said he's planning a, quote, intensive Israeli escalation, calling up tens of thousands of reservists for a new assault on Gaza. He is urging the alternative on Palestinians to just voluntarily leave Gaza to effectuate, quote, the vision of Donald Trump, which is, you know, that sick Gaza resort kind of thing. The other day, Maria Ressa was here, and one of the things she said to us was, silence is complicity. I would argue most of us have been silent about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza for a long time. I guess the question is why, and what do we do now? The number is 877-301-8970. Do you believe there's been a blockade on medicine, water, and food for almost 2 months? There are kids, 52,000 roughly Palestinians dead, the vast majority of them civilians. And I by the way, we said this the other day to one of our guests. In the early days after October 7th, once Israel had gone into Gaza, we all felt the need to say, as I hope we all felt, what happened on October 7th is unimaginably horrible, and so is what's happening to the Palestinians. I think that's a given now. We know that what happened on October 7th is unimaginably horrible, but since that, more than 50,000 people, including a ton of children, as I say, a majority of civilians have been killed. And apparently, if they don't cut a deal by the time, this is according to Netanyahu, if the Hamas doesn't cut a deal with the Israelis by the day that Trump, I think it's the 15th, goes to the Middle East. He's not going to Israel, theoretically. No. But interestingly, he's going to all the places that his sons have cut business deals with in the last couple of weeks.
Well, I don't think he wants to accentuate the fact that there is no peace yet between Israel and Gaza.
But he's saying that's the point at which we escalate, says Netanyahu. And as I said, the alternative, according to him, is just leave the country. I don't know where you go. Leave the country so that
other
Trump's vision can happen.
Won't take them.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know where they're going to go. And this piece in Axios is talking about this, says that Netanyahu wants to Palestinians leave the country for other countries, and other countries won't take them, in line with President Trump's vision for Gaza. So I don't know what that means if he's seriously thinking about the resort.
I'm sure, totally. I think he is.
President Trump is. But you know.
By the way, Netanyahu is a very smart guy. Obviously, he realizes it's never going to happen. But it's another example of a leader who is smart enough to praise anything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. You want support from the Trump administration, you praise him. Whether you're a secretary in his cabinet, you're the prime minister of England, you're the prime minister of Israel. That's the way you get support from Donald Trump, and Netanyahu plays him incredibly well. 877-301-8970 is the number.
I mean, you said at the beginning, you mentioned Rümeysa Öztürk. We're going to talk with Carol Rose and Markey about the latest, about her being still in that detention center in Louisiana. But she wrote this, she co-wrote with, I think, at least one or two other people, that op-ed in Tufts. So when you read it, it is not pro-Hamas at all. It's talking about the suffering that's going on in Palestine. It's wanting Tufts to disengage from their investments with Israel and that kind of stuff. It's not a pro-Hamas thing. But if that's all it takes to get you to be disappeared off the streets and then reappeared in some detention center in Louisiana, you can understand why people that are not on college campuses, even if they're American citizens, are not keen on doing demonstrations over there. And we should point out, by the way, that in the big anti-Semitism report that Harvard released, talking about real and horrible incidents of anti-Semitism on campus, they also talked about real and horrible incidents of Islamophobia on campus. And it seems as though the only thing that matters to the Trump administration is there, and I don't think it's a real anti-Semitism crusade, but it's the lives of Palestinians in Gaza, or the lives of people who are here protesting what's going on in Gaza, don't matter.
Read Adam from New Hampshire's text, and you can respond to it.
I haven't read it. I'm not sure if either of you have either. I'm not sure I would take your word for it, but could a reasonable person argue that her words could constitute excitement to violence?
This is the Öztürk op-ed.
No, it's very easy to read. You look at, Google her name, Adam. Go Google the Tufts. What's the name of the
Tufts Daily?
The Tufts Daily. You can find it very, very easily. It is no incitement to violence at all. So that's what's really frightening about this. It's a reasonable person. I mean, you can argue whether they should divest. Tufts should be divesting from anything having to do with Israel. I mean, people used to argue about that all the time in different civil rights issues. I mean, most famously apartheid, remember? Back when everybody was arguing about divesting in South Africa for apartheid. But anyway, it's I would say, a fairly reasonable piece about what's going on in Gaza.
I think it's fairly reasonable. It's totally reasonable, and it's not incitement to anything except action. Amber in Worcester, before we get to the calls, and I agree with this, I'm going to guess it's becoming difficult to be outraged about foreign problems when our own country is being burned to the ground. It's a despair overload for empaths. That's a great line, Amber. That said, I did just replace my Ukrainian house flag. I think that is the problem. It's just so much. It's only so much. You know what one of the things Kamal Bell mentioned yesterday is pick one thing. And he didn't mean that cruelly. He meant you can't deal with everything. Pick one thing that you care about a lot and do what you can to deal with that particular issue. And I agree with him, because otherwise you just flounder.
And by the way, I want to commend 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes is under basically the person that runs, Sherry Redstone, the person that runs Paramount, is trying to make a big deal.
Which owns CBS News.
Which owns CBS News. So she wants them to not do anything that's too upsetting to Donald Trump. Well, last Sunday, Scott Pelley, the guy who made the announcement at the end of the show previous, saying we're not going to knuckle down to Donald Trump, they did this scathing thing about the law firms that have knuckled down to Trump and haven't knuckled down to Trump. Somebody described it as, it was like scathing basically captures it. That was last Sunday after they were warned from Sherry Redstone, and they were kind of warned from Donald Trump. Because previous to that, they'd done some pieces that were very tough on Trump too, including one about this American physician who was over in Gaza talking about how, because they don't have any supplies anymore, including anesthesia, they were having to amputate limbs of children without anesthesia. And you're watching this and you're just sick to your stomach and thinking, how are you supposed to protest that if you think that's outrageous without getting deported?
Before we take calls, and we'll get to them in about 30 seconds, I am in no way suggesting there's any equivalency between how Trump is handling Gaza and how Biden did. Biden made a ton of mistakes, too.
He absolutely
did. Continued supplying of
those huge bombs
without getting major agreements from Israel. to do the right thing here. And
well, some people think he made huge mistakes not giving more air power to the Ukrainians when they thought it would matter in their battle with Russia.
In timely fashion. Well,
yes.
Seth Moulton amongst them, who knows a lot. And by the way, again, I can't believe I'm even saying this again, but let's get it out of the way. Israel obviously has a right to defend itself, and they should be helped in that fashion in any way they can, but the response is so out of proportion, I think is really hard to argue otherwise. And we're doing nothing, and by the way, Marjorie and I, the reason we're doing this today is because both of us felt bad this morning.
We haven't done anything.
We were talking about it. We haven't talked about it on the air in weeks and weeks and weeks.
I should point out, I don't think you pointed this out yet. If you did, I'm sorry to repeat it, but polls in Israel show that 60 to 70% of Israelis oppose this major operation to occupy Gaza that Netanyahu was talking about. So the people there are not with him on this.
Well, the majority of people in Israel, the most recent poll I've seen, they'll overwhelmingly support Donald Trump, for whatever that's worth. Jim in Manchester by the Sea. You are first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Sure.
What I think there's first of all, I think there's an epidemic of cruelty in the world.
I would agree.
And there's acceptance of, persecution of many people. We've grown to sort of tolerate it. But I'd also say that there are a lot of people who self-identify as liberals. And I'm personally, I'm kind of a Bernie type of person, but a lot of people who self-identify as liberals, who frankly are kind of cool with 52,000 dead Palestinians.
Well, I have to say, I know a lot of liberals. I don't know any of them who are, to use your word, Jim, respectfully, cool with 52,000 dead Palestinians.
Unfortunately, I do.
Well, and based on what's their thinking, yeah.
They just think, first of all, they don't see the Palestinians as being willing to live peacefully with Israel, and they think that Israel can do whatever it wants. Well, they really don't see it as. And I'll just give you another example.
Jim, what part of them is liberal? I mean, how do they? You mean self-described liberals?
Big time Joe Biden voters.
Okay, well, I don't know what that means, but okay.
Well, one more. They're very supportive of Joe Biden.
Yeah, go ahead.
But they identify as Democrats.
Yeah.
And Cory Booker, in his 25 hours, never once mentioned the freedom of speech issues for these people who are outspoken about Palestinian human rights. Not once.
Well, I don't know that. I assume.
And so there's it's
Jim, you made your point. You made your point. I know a lot of people. I would have to say I know almost nobody, and when I say it, almost nobody, except people in this government and hard right MAGA supporters of Trump who will do anything he says or suggests, who are not, let me say, at least made uncomfortable, if not sick, by the murders, the killings, the mass killings in Gaza. But thanks for your call, Jim. And by the way, if any of Jim's liberal friends, so-called liberal friends, would like to call and tell us why you're, quote, cool with 52,000 dead Palestinians, feel free to buzz us at 877-301-8970.
We're getting a recommendation to listen to the recent This American Life podcast about American doctors in Gaza. That could be the same people that were on 60 Minutes talking about people being intentionally shot and how they have not the supplies to deal with them in the hospitals.
Did you read the R story in the interview in the New Yorker with a former aid worker with the U.S. group R, whatever the refugee group that now Israel won't talk to, and she can't get back into the country to help, but she's in touch with their colleagues. I know this is obvious, talks about how many parents they encounter who are not eating at all in a day, so the limited amount of food they have, they can give to their children. And when you see these occasional videos of these children, it is unimaginable suffering, and it is not. You can say in one breath, Hamas has to be eradicated. At the same time, assuming that's realistic, at the same time that the savagery directed at the Palestinians has just got to stop. Just got to stop.
Judith from Framingham, thank you for calling.
Hi, I'm a long-time listener. This is my third time calling in. I'm a million-time texter.
Thank you.
But this is something.
Thanks.
But this is something that I've had trouble putting words together for, and I'm not sure how popular it's going to be.
Say whatever you think.
I'm a dual citizen. Well, I hope you listen to. So I'm a dual citizen. I've lived in Israel. Right now, I'm in the States, and I'm considered pretty left. I am so against everything that Trump does or stands for, including the deportation of people who are, just practicing their rights of speech. I'm against. I don't think he's done anything to help Israel or the Jews by what he's saying. I just think he's working against it. He doesn't give. Well, he doesn't care.
Anybody Judith, you're breaking up. Judith, you know what we're going to do? Because we really want to talk to you. We're going to put you on hold for a minute, take a call, come right back
see if
to
you
you.
can go to a different part of the house or someplace different because we can't.
But please don't hang up.
Yeah, don't hang up. Michelle from Melrose, thank you for calling.
Well, we got another one. Michelle, we're going to put you on hold, too.
Could it be us?
Well, it could be, but let's try a third, and that will be the proof.
Anonymous texter says he's surprised Trump isn't already selling timeshares in Gaza.
I'm sure he will. Chafee and Amesbury, hello.
Yeah, hi, Jim. I have two things I want to say about the conflict there. First of all, that I can't believe the propaganda from either side, either the Palestinian or the Israeli side, about what's going on. And it's very hard to be, even between the two groups. You're either, anti this or anti that.
Well, you don't have to be. Chafee, you don't have to be at all.
And hold on for 1 second, Chafee. I mean, when you see the hostages come back and tell their stories, which are gruesome and horrible stories, do you think that's propaganda? Or when you see pictures of the rubble that is all that remains of Gaza, is that propaganda? What are you talking about? What propaganda?
What I'm talking about is the utter, wrongness of the other side. If you put up any argument in favor of one side or the other, you're being anti this or that or the other, rather than trying to look for a solution. And I think there is a solution that's never been talked about, and that is that we all know that Hamas is a very brutal organization with its own people. They're like the mafia. Anybody who disagrees with them, they kill. We know that. So, create a safe zone in the top of Gaza, filter all the people who want to live in peace and are going to get rid of all their arms. We'll seal them off and let them, live humanely, and then continue on with the other groups. And gradually you get more and more people coming across and choosing that option.
Chafee, thanks for the call. Anonymous texter says, what would a proportional response be in the war in Gaza? And I guess my answer to you, Anonymous texter, is I can't tell you what proportional is. I can tell you what disproportional is. 52,000 people, majority civilians, killing a medical humanitarian crew, pretending that they didn't have their red lights on and signs saying who they were. And then when a video on one of the dead bodies' phones is found, and it turns out, in fact, there was that warning light and there were those signs, that's not proportional. So that's the answer to your question.
Yeah, those were all those ambulances with the. Well,
it's happened more than once.
Yeah, it has happened more than once.
We're going to get back to the people with the rotten connection as soon as we come back.
Okay, we're sorry about that. Coming up after a quick break, we're going to keep talking more about what's going on in Israel and Gaza. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, the music of Jaws. Steven Spielberg credited much of the movie's success to John Williams and his Academy Award-winning compositions. And just when you thought it was safe to go back in the concert hall, Keith Lockhart and the Boston Pops Orchestra are performing the entire score in sync with one of the greatest motion pictures of all time. Keith Lockhart joins us for a preview. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Johnson & Wales University, now offering 3-year career-focused bachelor's degrees in graphic design, computer science, criminal justice, and hospitality management. More at jwu.edu. And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping you achieve your vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding you from design to completion with showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan, Jim Browdy. We're at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're talking about the situation in Gaza. Another anonymous texter. By the way, you can sign your text, people. You don't have to worry. No one in the media is talking about Palestinians. That's why we're trying to do it today. It's disgusting, hard to comprehend. Stop the lame sarcasm about Gaza timeshares, please. It's not lame sarcasm at all. Here's Donald Trump in his Riviera of the Middle East talk when he was with Netanyahu. I think this was in February. Here it is.
I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East. And everybody I've spoken to, this was not a decision made lightly. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land. You have to learn from history. History has, you just can't let it keep repeating itself. We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East.
It's not lame sarcasm. It's actually United States policy through the President of the United States. Let me quote again. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land. Do you know anybody who loves other than the Trump children and family, who loves the idea of him owning that piece of land?
I don't, but maybe I'm traveling in the wrong circles. Here's a text from a guy who says, I'm a hardcore Trump supporter. Trump's support of Israel is the one part of his platform that myself and most young Trump supporters disagree with him on. The only people on the right supporting this are the boomer neocons who'd never seen a war they don't like. I don't know if that's true, but that's an interesting perspective. Someone also texted they follow Al Jazeera online, and they see these heartbreaking stories every single day. And, we should also mention the theory, that I've read over and over again, is Netanyahu, because he's got corruption problems and legal problems, is keeping this war going for that reason, too.
It's like Trump's distractions.
Yeah,
Variation of theme.
and that's kind of a crummy reason to be keeping the war going.
Let's try. I'm sorry.
We're going to try Judith from Framingham again. Hi, Judith.
Hello, Judith.
Hi. Well, in listening to everything now with Trump and everything, my eyes have been rolling out of my head. But he doesn't know about history, and he doesn't care about history. But anyway, what I wanted to say, I'm trying to remember where I left off, was that I'm against Netanyahu completely, and so was a lot of Israel, and they were demonstrating against him until October 7th.
Huge demonstrations. You're right.
So I just let me try to make it short. The problem is that you guys have not been silent about what's going on in Gaza. You've been talking about it constantly, and about how it's not like what the protesters were doing wasn't, anti-Semitic. It was like, and not pro-Hamas. And so you haven't been silent at all. And what I feel like, ever since October 7th, which was a horrific massacre by terrorists into Israel, murdering as many people as they can get to. I know that you say it's disproportionate, and I'm not happy about I'm very upset about what's been going on in Gaza. And all the things you said are true about what's been happening. But if the Hamas terrorists had found 50,000 people to murder, they would have murdered 50,000.
I think you're right.
And so my feeling is that October 7th has changed to when Israel started the war in Gaza, and that the United States and many others have given 5 minutes maybe, I know that's an exaggeration, but 5 minutes to the massacre that happened in Israel, and now October 7th is, now Israel went into Gaza and started all this awful stuff. And I think, I feel like sometimes it's just lip service to say, well, we know it was awful and everything.
Well, I hear
don't
you,
know-
Judith.
I don't-
I understand that, and I appreciate it, but it's not lip service here. I can't speak for other people. And, for example, we had a leader in the Jewish, what was the name of the organization, the Jewish Committee on Public Affairs? The head was here the other day, who calls herself a progressive Zionist.
Yeah.
And I think she spoke perfectly to her deep concern for what happened on October 7th, her deep belief that Israel should be able to defend itself, and the disproportionality. I'm not putting words in her mouth, but this was essentially her message of the Israeli response. So I think a lot of people who have their hearts in the right place do believe what they say, and I think she and we are among them. Judith, thanks for an excellent call.
We've said this
Call us again.
so many times. I mean, Juliet Kayyem said it earlier on. You can hold two things at once, right? The
Exactly right.
gruesomeness of what happened October 7th and the gruesomeness of what's happening now. And, you know, we used to talk a lot more about two-state solutions than we're talking about now. And now, instead of talking about two-state solutions, we're talking about the Riviera on the Middle East and Gaza.
By the way, I should have said Amy Spitalnik is obviously the woman who's with us, who's head
Yeah.
of the Jewish Council
Well,
for Public Affairs. She was great.
You know what she was also arguing, and she's not the only one now, more people, but she was the first person I heard say this, that what all this supposedly anti-Semitic crusade that Trump is on is causing anti-Semitism.
Exactly right.
That you know, because you may look at that and say, well, is this really what this is about? And meanwhile, what about the Islamophobia?
And by the way, for you, the Trump people, who we really wish would call rather than just text, if you disagree with us, we really would like you to call. For those who say that's BS, what kind of person who's a leader who cares about anti-Semitism dines with white supremacists? I don't know any except Donald Trump.
Right.
So if you have an answer
Well,
to that,
when
again,
Jews were not replacing us, that was a cheer in Charlottesville, and there were fine people on both sides. So it's not really about anti-Semitism, I
At
think. I
all.
think we could say at this point.
Anyway,
Michelle and Melrose. Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I really struggle with this. I am half Jewish. I have a lot of Jewish friends and family. And I do think what's happening is wrong and absolutely disproportionate to what happened. I kind of respectfully disagree with the previous caller. I think they could have killed 50,000 if they had gotten their hands on them, but they didn't. So I just think that's kind of a strange comparison to make. But right now what the issue is, I feel like any criticism against Israel is conflated with anti-Semitism. And I'm a coward, but I worry about being labeled as anti-Semitic just for speaking out against what's happening right now.
I totally understand it,
yeah.
and you're not alone. We hear that a lot from people. Michelle, thanks for holding on. Thanks for the call. Dunede in Lexington, who signed, I think, her text and their text as an Israeli American, says, you haven't mentioned the hostages that are still held in Gaza. I'm skipping a minute. How about pro-Palestinian demonstrators demanding the return of the hostages? Many do, all should. I couldn't agree with you more, and our apologies, I thought we had, but if we haven't, that should have been mentioned. But by the way, an earlier texter said if Hamas released the remaining hostages, dead and alive, Netanyahu would back off. I don't see where that comes from at all. His position is Hamas has got to be eradicated. And the beauty of that is you were able to say, if you're Netanyahu, that they're never eradicated. And we always have to keep going. And so, again, the hostages should be released. But for those who think that'll bring an end to it, I think that's naive.
How do you know that Hamas is eradicated?
Well, exactly. And that's why he uses that issue, because you never do know.
There are little Hamasians being born every day, you know, after.
By virtue of the reaction,
yes,
yeah,
exactly. It creates more terrorists.
But we got to go. Well,
we have to go.
Well,
okay.
You called on Joe. So let's
All
take
right,
him.
Joe,
You have
from
30
Bolton.
seconds.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. Long-time listener. I've called several times before. I just wanted to point out, when I was at the big march on April 5th, almost every one of the young people, and there were young people there that I saw, were carrying pro-Palestinian signs or Palestinian flags, which I thought was very inspiring. And I don't think any of us gray hairs had anything to do, had any signs that mentioned Palestine. I had a Ukrainian flag with me, but I think that if the anti-Trump people want to get young people involved, they need to get off the fence and speak out in favor of in defense of the suffering civilians in Gaza and also now in the West Bank. And that's all I have to say.
Joe, you said it well. Thank you very much for the call. By the way, we've been working really hard with a friend who works at the UN to get one of the UN humanitarian workers who is now no longer in Gaza and can't get back in to join us on the show, and we hope that'll happen by next week.
Okay, coming up after a quick break, the ACLU of Massachusetts, Carol Rose, is here. She's going to talk about Trump's confusion about the United States Constitution and the latest on the abortion pill, mifepristone. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Catholic cardinals convene this week to select a new pope, and the voting process is really more personal than political.
They're not electing a set of principles. Ideological positions or even doctrinal battles are not what's at the forefront. They're electing a person to lead them and to lead the church.
That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts. BSU's skilled graduates are recruited by today's industry leaders, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And Safety Insurance, offering auto insurance policies designed to help for when the worst happens. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browding, Marge Regan, live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Senator Markey zooms in right after noon. Governor Healy is here for an hour with us. I think it's noon to 1 on Friday, this Friday. By the way, before we introduce Carol Rose, Anonymous Texter says Trump supporters don't call in because you speak over them, hang up on them without allowing them to speak. Let me explain to you, if any caller, regardless of their point of view, if their call is fact-based, they get a fair hearing. If you are, regardless of your ideology, if your call is based on, quote, facts that are not facts, we're going to call you out. That's the bottom line. So I don't care what your political persuasion is. Speak on facts, and everyone in that category is welcome on the show. In any case, speaking of welcome, joining us now at the desk here at the library is Carol Rose. She's the Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. Hi, Carol.
Hi, it's great to be here, everyone.
Nice to see you. You're not busy, though. That's good.
Yeah. So let's start with Trump's announcement. This was on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker last Sunday when he was asked about whether everyone was entitled to due process, every person in American soil, whether they're a citizen or not. And he basically said he didn't know about the Constitution. I don't know when she was asked about that because that's in the Constitution. Trump said, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. Of course, we all know that everybody has to, stand up and raise their right hand.
An oath to the Constitution. But, yeah, he took an oath to uphold the Constitution. That's part of becoming the president of the United States.
Maybe he's forgotten what's in there.
Well, we know in the legal profession, ignorance is not an excuse for not knowing the law. You can't claim ignorance of the law as an excuse for your behavior. But if he needs a remedial crash course, I will volunteer for the ACLU to help him out.
Has there ever been a president, to your knowledge, I don't know how much of an historian, has ever been asked that question? It's so ridiculous to ask a Republican or Democratic president, no matter what their politics are, do you believe you have to uphold the due process clause in the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution?
It's the most, it's the due process clause, and this is what so many of these cases are about. It's just like fundamental due process under law for the Constitution. And, that's why we filed now more than 110 lawsuits in the first 100 days of the Trump administration. And so many of them are so fundamental about things like basic due process, free speech, equal protection. These are fundamental, these are not complex statutes. These are fundamental principles upon which our entire democracy was founded.
The other thing, I say this every day we've only discussed this since Sunday, because it's 2 days, I guess, because Welker just had the interview with him 2 days ago. You can have due process. This is about people who are undocumented here. You can have due process, have a hearing, and be deported. If the merits are, after having received due process, that you are eligible for deportation, you can be deported. No one is saying that there's a bar on outcomes.
That's
It's just saying you're entitled to a hearing.
That's correct, Jim. And the Constitution applies to all people in the United States.
No person, it says. Not no citizen. It says
correct.
No person.
Well, I think a lot of people are confused about that.
Right.
And by the way, Supreme Court, we should be clear about this. This is not just your interpretation of what no person means in the Fifth Amendment. The Supreme Court of the United States has spoken to this.
It's the law.
That's what the law is, exactly.
Okay. All right. So speaking in the law, this is the other thing that's really driving me insane, and I'm so glad you're here so I can ask you about it. So this is Trump's ABC News Terry Moran interview when the president said he could comply with the U.S. Supreme Court decision instructing him to arrange the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who is in a Salvadoran prison without any due process. He could do that, but he won't do that. Here it is.
You could get him back. There's a phone on this desk.
I could.
You could pick it up, and with all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, send him back right now.
And if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that.
But the court has ordered you to facilitate that.
I'm not the one making this decision. We have lawyers that don't want to do this.
But the buck stops in this office.
No. I follow the law. You want me to follow the law? If I were the president that just wanted to do anything, I'd probably keep him right where he is.
If following the law is not something he's really been worried about, but my big question is, the Supreme Court has said he needs to facilitate getting this guy back, right. Mr. Garcia back. There's been all these lower courts that have talked about this. Is anybody ever going to do anything, like hold somebody in contempt here, put somebody in jail?
When he says he could facilitate it.
We're just going to let him do whatever he wants and just say, no problem.
No, I think the courts are moving in that direction, Marjorie. And if it's so interesting to listen. I just listened to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals arguments that ended just 5 minutes ago.
On what?
On the Öztürk case, on the Rümeysa Öztürk case. And we see the judges getting increasingly frustrated with people, the government lawyers, who are saying, I don't know, I can't answer. I'd have to ask the government. And to which one of the judges replied, but you are the government. And we're seeing this in case after case after case in the lawsuit against the law firms.
So what are we waiting for?
Well, I think we're waiting for the process. The wheels of justice grind slowly. The processes grind slowly, but they are grinding along and they are moving along. And it's actually
but I think we got to get over this. The wheels of justice move slowly because the wheels of justice move so slowly under the previous Justice Department that we never even got Trump to trial. We can't just talk about. The courts could open earlier and stay open later. They open at 10. They have leisurely lunch break. They go to like 4.
At 11 o'clock
from your lips to the justice's ears.
But you know what I mean? It's kind of been let's just roll along.
And the most important right now cases in which justice delayed is justice denied are, in fact, these cases including the Tufts student who was picked up by plainclothes officers who are masked and hooded and put in an unmarked car and taken across state lines across 3 different states. She was hopscotched and then ultimately ends up in detention down in Louisiana.
She could die from an asthma attack.
That's exactly.
She's not
By the way, can I
treated.
interrupt only to say Ed Markey visited her with Ayanna Pressley and Jim McGovern. He's going to join us at noon.
Yep.
He's going to describe her condition when he joins us at noon.
And I'm so proud of our delegation for going down there and for standing witness for what's happening down there. So I'll let him talk about what he saw because it's really important that we know it. But this morning, what the government was arguing before the Second Circuit Court of Appeals.
You are the government.
Right. It was amazing. And they had this breathtaking assertion that somehow the writ of habeas corpus, the most fundamental notion.
Explain that to people.
So the writ of habeas corpus goes back even before the Magna Carta, way before the Constitution.
Remember
which
the Magna
says,
Carta? Florida?
The government
Vaguely.
in the 1600s. The government can't lock you up. Habeas corpus means to produce the body. The government can't lock you up and throw away the key without any due process.
Unless they do.
She's
been in jail 42 days. I did the math this morning.
And Khalil's been there longer.
For writing an op-ed.
For writing an op-ed and has not been charged with any crime. Literally, the government says, yeah, okay, we're just mad that she wrote an op-ed that we didn't like. But even Tufts, where she published it in the Tufts Daily News, even the Tufts president has come out and said she didn't violate any of the norms, anything. She did nothing wrong. And I would urge everyone who is paying attention to this, go and watch that video of her being picked up. She thought she was being kidnapped.
But here's the thing. This woman could die. I mean, she's had multiple asthma attacks. So I would say you can't be just the old rules of justice delayed is justice. I mean, this is justice denied right now, and you know the process.
The court will rule today.
But we need someone to light a
back.
firecracker under some of these judges, I think, and I don't mean that literally, obviously, but you know, this is an emergency, and we're acting like it's the same old, same old.
I don't think we are acting like that. I mean, right now, the Vermont judge has set a bail hearing for May 9th, which is just coming up on Friday, right? And then the habeas petition hearing is on May 22nd. So that's moving actually fairly expeditiously. I mean, not as quickly as you and I would like, but at least we have dates set. And right now, what the government is doing is the same old Trump playbook, trying to delay.
Right.
They're appealing and they're asking for stays and they're asking for, pauses and all these things. And the courts should just say no. Bring her back, have the bail hearing, give her the due process to which she is entitled under the Constitution as part of our democracy. So this isn't just about her. This is about all of us.
Okay, Channel Markey. No, I want to play you for a second. In the case, once he said, I could facilitate the return to Terry Moran.
Supreme Court
Here's the question that Marjorie really wants to ask, but she's too shy.
I'm too shy.
Why did the lawyer in that case not immediately go back to the federal district court judge, whose name I can't pronounce, begins with an X, and say, we're moving that the government be held in contempt for violating the Supreme Court order, and the judge then say, I'm ordering the governor to file a brief by 5 o'clock today, and we'll have a hearing tomorrow. I mean, she's totally right. I don't get it at all.
And I don't know procedurally where that is. I do know that's evidence in the case, but his statements are evidence in the case. I don't know what the civil procedural schedule is on that case, but it's an ACLU case, so I'll find out and let you know.
Okay, I don't know if the ACLU is involved in this thing. You have to explain the Trump administration's position on this mifepristone case, which I have to say I don't understand at all. Explain what happened in that Texas case with Kazmark, or whatever the judge's name is, who's a big Trump guy. Explain what happened and explain what the Trump administration is now saying and why.
All right, so mifepristone has been used in medication abortions and miscarriage care for years. It's safer than Viagra. All right, so just saying, it's the FDA has proven it to be safe.
26 years, I think.
Yeah, I think that's
something
right.
Like that,
so and it's a very common form because it is safe, and we want people to have when they need reproductive health care, when they need abortion care or miscarriage care, we want them to have the best medicine that's available. And so during the Biden administration, a group of people who were opposed to having mifepristone be available went down and picked the one judge in the one district. They set up a corporation, his district, so they could try to...
Is that true?
Yes, to try to get standing to file a lawsuit say,
this is great.
We are being injured by the existence of the ability of people to get access to this. And the court threw it out. The appeals court threw it out and said, the lower court judge, who they knew would be with them, a Trump appointee.
Kazmark.
Yeah, Kazmark.
Yeah, Kazmark, I'm sorry.
Yeah, said, okay, you're being harmed. And then the appellate court said, no, you're not, and they threw it out. Then some states came in and said, okay, well, these states, and I think the states are Missouri, Idaho, and Kansas, said that they would like to go in and try to see if they would have what's called standing, like you actually have to prove injury. They would have standing to challenge and to try to say that the courts should remove access to mifepristone. And so the Biden administration argued, no, you states also do not have standing.
Yeah, it's tough for a state to get an abortion.
It's a loser of an argument. And so the Trump administration, the lawyers in the Department of Justice said, yeah, we're not going to try to make that argument, probably because it's a losing, silly argument to make. But that doesn't mean that the Trump administration has suddenly come around and said that they're going to support access to mifepristone and other safe reproductive health care medicines.
But they take an irresponsible position. I mean, judges have been criticizing the Department of Justice lawyers.
I don't think they want to lose. I think what they're, unfortunately, what they could do is do things like go to the RFK Jr.'s FDA and try to get it, prevented in other ways. I think what they don't want is what's a clear loser in the courts.
Yeah.
So I wish we could say that this was a change of heart, but I'm a little more skeptical than that.
We're talking to Carol Rose, who runs the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts.
So the Immigration Service, Tom Homans, who seems like not a very nice guy to me, that runs the whole thing, has talked about how if there are children here who are American citizens, but a parent gets deported, the parent has the option to take the child with him. Well, I guess this didn't work out in this heartbreaking case of this 2-year-old girl whose mother has been deported.
Right.
She expected she was going to, if not take the kid with her, at least have the child stay with the father.
Father's in an El Salvadorian prison. He's in.
That's right. He's in a Salvadorian prison, so he couldn't take the child.
That's right.
Now this kid is in her 3rd foster family. She's 2 years old.
Oh, it's just cruelty is the point. I mean, just they are not providing due process. They're not keeping families together. They did this under the first Trump administration, and again, the ACLU sued, and we were able to get some of these families reunited. But there were like thousands and thousands of children who were separated from their parents, from their families, and put into whether foster care or detention and these kinds of things. So family separation is not new under the Trump administration. It's just back with full vigor, and we need to fight it every step of the way, because this is so anti-American, this is so unpatriotic, this so violates our values as Americans that all of us need to stand up and say, not on our watch. And so we're doing it in the courts, but everybody needs to do it in the streets, and letters to your members of Congress, in phone calls, whatever tool you can find, you need to fight back against this.
Can I just say one thing here? So we preclude a lot of texts that I'm sure are coming. I mean, you can text anyway. The argument the Trump administration is making in this case, Homan, whoever is making the case, is both parents are gang members. The father is a gang member. The mother recruits young women for the gangs. The only response to that is, one, they provided no evidence like they ever do, and they've been charged with no crimes. So under the way our country works, as of the moment, they're not gang members, and they haven't committed crimes. And if they are gang members, produce the evidence and prosecute them.
Innocent until proven guilty. And, the one thing that's so terrifying is of the 380 or so Venezuelan men who were taken down to El Salvador and put in one of the worst prisons. It's a private prison, one of the worst in the country. The vast majority of them, like 85% or something, have no criminal conviction, have never been picked up for anything. They literally are denying people due process. They're profiling them, and they're doing it because they want to try to hit their immigration numbers. Same thing with offering people who self-deport money to leave. They're trying to hit some artificial number that has nothing to do with keeping us safe, and certainly nothing to do with keeping us free.
So I hate to keep dumping on the courts, but at the rate the courts are moving, this 2-year-old could be 6 before she's either back with her mother.
The irreparable harm is incredible.
Yeah, and it is not. We all know this from any place. Multiple foster homes is not a way to grow up.
No, exactly. And the harm is irreparable, the emotional, the mental health. And in fact, after the first Trump administration, the ACLU filed a lawsuit and was able to receive lots of money for the families that have been, separated to get mental health and other kinds of health care for these children.
Some of those families, there were 5,000 at first. Some of them are never
found.
Never reunified. I mean, it's just, can you imagine?
And I have to tell you, Jim, it was so heartbreaking this morning in the arguments before the Second Circuit, because one of the things the courts ask about is where's the irreparable harm to the government by not providing due process, fair process to Rümeysa Öztürk, and where's the harm to her? And the government could only say, well, our government prerogatives are harmed, and that's an inherent harm. Like nonsense. These are real human beings who are being denied their medication. She's being denied her health medication for her asthma. People who are being detained, and just think about it for anyone. If you are put in a cage, that is irreparable harm. If you're separated from your children, that is irreparable harm to you and to the children. And so these are human rights violations. And as such, not only are they unconstitutional, but they're unconscionable.
But on another more mundane level, what is the point of running a detention facility when you can't even give someone a blanket when they're sleeping at night? Is the cruelty just the message there,
I think cruelty is the point. I think they're trying to be cruel on purpose.
These are private run
these are privately
operations,
run
too, which is
prisons.
another problem,
Yes.
if you ask me.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you're going to be talking to Senator Markey and to hear more about what's going on in Louisiana, because those are also cruel and unusual detention centers.
By the way, we were just told by an anonymous texter, we were just cut off because of the emergency alert system. There was no message. Okay.
Was that the emergency alert to make sure everyone gives money to National Public Radio?
Yeah,
and
is that what we're doing? I know. We're in emergency.
Okay. Well, you're probably not going to hear this either, so why say it?
Do we have the emergency system is going on now?
I have no idea. Talk to your lead producer.
Oh,
Aren't
it's
they your
done.
staff?
Oh, it's done.
Your staff.
John
Talk to
says
your
it's done.
staff.
He just told me in my ear.
I know, but it's a little late in light of the fact that it already cut out part of our show, but what the hell do we care? Okay, before you go, did you see the story? You want to talk about Doge, and the ACLU is suing to get access to records. Did either of you see the story about, and the photograph, this little 19-year-old punk? We've never seen who Big Balls was, who's one of the Doge kids.
Yeah, yes.
This kid is 19 years old, and the power that he has over the people of the United States is more than Ed Markey, who's going to be here at 12:06, has. It's just unimaginable.
Someone
to
who
me.
never was appointed or confirmed by the Senate, who was not elected. He was 19, and who has a history of doing nasty things on the internet.
Went to Northeastern.
It's really unconscionable.
I forgot that. He went to Northeastern.
Local connection, the dreaded local angle.
So what are you trying to do?
Massachusetts. Is he from Massachusetts? I'm not sure.
What is it the ACLU is trying to do here?
So what we've done is we filed a Freedom of Information Act request to try to get more information so we can find out what they're doing, because not only are they
health records, financial records.
We don't know. And so part of it is we need to know what they're doing, at a minimum, some kind of government transparency in a democracy. But I have to tell you how scary this is, because if you think about all the information that you have, your banking information, your health information, your location information, all of this being subject to this kid, and these kids who are going in there.
Big Balls is his name, by the way.
Right, and we don't even know.
Can't say it, can you?
And we don't even know what they're doing. And I would contest and suggest that probably not even a good name. But I'm just saying.
Probably not.
Reports suggest.
You don't know it firsthand.
No.
You're surmising.
But these Doge kids have gone to really extraordinary lengths to try to avoid any kind of government accountability. And I think we, the people, once again, need to rise up and say, this is unacceptable on our watch. This is un-American. This is unpatriotic. This is unconstitutional. And we need to raise our voices. So the ACLU will continue to raise alarms and to continue to challenge this stuff in court. But we also need people power behind that to make sure that we're all taking care, and to make sure that our state legislature and our cities and towns are taking steps to protect our data privacy. And that's why one of the big agendas we have in the State House right now is to pass this Location Shield Act, which would prevent the government and private data brokers from tracking us based on our cell phones, because we take our cell phones.
Speaker just called us. He said as soon as he gets the $25 million garage for his hometown, he'll get on to your legislation. I'm going to talk about that in an hour. Last thing about this, with people rising up, I've been very critical of the American people. In these polls on the 100th anniversary, they're getting it. Musk's approval rating is 33%, which is almost zero, because anybody gets 33%. People are catching on. It's a little late in the game, but they're catching on, which is a hopeful sign.
I think it's a really hopeful sign. And I will just say, if you have a chance wherever you are, whether you're a teacher or a friend or a parent or anybody else, raise your voice, do your bit. You don't have to have a law degree to be part of saving democracy. All of us need to be called up.
Thank you, Carol Rose. Really appreciate it, Carol Rose.
We've been speaking with Carol Rose, Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. Up next, we're going to be speaking with Senator Ed Markey, who, as we just said, has recently visited Tufts grad student Rümeysa Öztürk in detention in Louisiana. We're going to talk to you about that and a bunch of other stuff. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, Ken Burns, outlier author Malcolm Gladwell, and geopolitical economist Pippa Malmgren. bostonspeakers.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 2, Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library, fresh off a trip to Louisiana's ICE Detention Center with Jim McGovern and Ayanna Presley to visit Tufts student Rümeysa Öztürk. Senator Ed Markey zooms into the library. We'll talk about his recent speech on the Senate floor, about the 100 harms committed by Trump in the first 100 days back in office, and are Democrats as messageless as former Mayor and Labor Secretary Marty Walsh claims.
I'm Marjorie Egan, then it's Boston Foundation President and CEO Lee Pelton. As federal authorities slash funding for nonprofits, his foundation is ramping up their safety net grants. But how long can they keep it up? And how do federal housing cuts stand to impact the most at risk in our community? We'll get Lee's thoughts on that, plus Trump's latest attack on Harvard. All that, plus two more things ahead on the second hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth plans to reduce the number of senior officers at the Pentagon, saying in a video he wants, quote, less generals and more GIs. More on this from NPR's Tom Bowman.
Hegseth laid out his plan in a memo calling for a 20% cut in the number of four-star active duty generals and admirals and another 20% cut in National Guard generals. The secretary said he worked with the Joint Chiefs of Staff on the plan, and the goal was maximizing strategic readiness. There were some 800 generals and admirals in the military. Hegseth offered no detail how he would make the reductions. The top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator Jack Reed, criticized the move, saying cutting experienced officers won't make the military more efficient. It could cripple it. Tom Bowman, NPR News.
President Trump's hosting Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who just arrived at the White House. Trump has said he was looking forward to the face-to-face meeting, but on Truth Social today, Trump also criticized current economic deals between the U.S. and Canada, saying that its northern neighbor is being heavily subsidized by the U.S. Canada's recent election that extended Carney's time in office was widely viewed as a referendum in that country against Trump's tariffs policies and threats of Canada's or threats to Canada's sovereignty. The administration is ratcheting up its pressure on Harvard University to comply with its demands or risk losing additional federal funding. From member station GBH in Boston, Kirk Carapezza reports.
In a letter to Harvard President Alan Garber, Education Secretary Linda McMahon accuses the university of a, quote, systemic pattern of violating federal law. She says Harvard has failed to address anti-Semitism and defied the Supreme Court's ban against its race-conscious admissions policy. Harvard is already suing the administration over its decision to freeze more than $2 billion in grants. A university spokesperson says the administration is illegally withholding research funding in retaliation for that lawsuit, calling it an overreach that will have a chilling effect on higher education. For NPR News, I'm Kirk Carapezza in Boston.
The Department of Homeland Security is offering a one-time stipend to people who, quote, self-deport. More from NPR's Jimena Bustillo.
DHS said it will give $1,000 to people who use the CBP Home app to return to their home countries. The money will allegedly be paid after they confirm their arrival through the app. They say this is a way to make it cheaper to remove people from the U.S. According to DHS, it costs $17,000 to arrest, detain, and remove one person. But questions remain on the effectiveness of the program. Immigrant rights advocates say there is an incentive for immigrants to trust the administration will follow through on payments or the promise that they can return.
That's NPR's Jimena Bustillo reporting. At last check on Wall Street, the Dow was down 200 points or roughly 0.5%. It's NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Lawmakers on Beacon Hill considering creating a war chest fund to help community hospitals and clinics cover medical costs for large numbers of uninsured and low-income patients. According to the Eagle Tribune, a provision within the House of Representatives' $62 billion state budget that was approved last week. They would transfer $230 million from the Commonwealth Care Trust Fund to fill the revenue gaps in the state's health safety net program. And voters on Nantucket Town Meeting Monday rejected all 4 short-term rental proposals on the warrant. The The Inquirer and Mirror reports that with no short-term rental zoning regulations passed and none currently on the books, the issue is now in the hands of a land court judge who's deliberating an appeal of a resident who's suing the town over its decision to allow a neighbor to rent their home on a short-term basis more frequently than they live in it. Voters came closest to a resolution of the short-term rental question with an article that received a majority vote but fell short of the two-thirds threshold required for a zoning bylaw to pass, and the article would have allowed short-term rentals island-wide as a primary use to be regulated through existing and future general bylaws. Red Sox at Fenway tonight. They host Texas, a 6:45 start. In the forecast, scattered showers today. Could be heavy at times. Raining right now in Raintree. Really wet in Watertown. High today in the 60s. We are at 63 degrees outside our studios here in Brighton. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher's dedicated team of specialists provide resources on investing, retirement income, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. Thank you. And streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Going to be joined by Governor Maura Healey on Friday here at the library for another edition of Ask the Governor, as well as another edition of Ask the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, on May 13th. And on May 13th as well, Josh Kraft, who's running for mayor of Boston, is going to join us at the BPL. Hello again, Jim.
Hey, Marjorie. Joining us now on Zoom from Washington is United States Senator Ed Markey. Senator, thank you so much for your time.
So great to be with you again.
You
yes,
too.
Thank you very much, Senator, for joining us. So you were on the Senate floor talking about the 100 harms of the first 100 days of the Trump administration. Would you give us the highlights?
Well, the highlights are that they're slashing the funding for research for Alzheimer's and cancer and diabetes and for all of the diseases which run through the genes of every American. And they right now are paralyzing all of that research. They're driving thousands of young researchers out of choosing that kind of research life that really gives hope to families that a cure will be found. And by the way, it's happening all across Massachusetts right now. In our hospitals, in our biotechs, it's increasingly difficult for each one of these major institutions in the Commonwealth to hold on to the next generation of researchers because they can't give a guarantee that the funding will be there so that these young people can choose that vital research as a career.
You know, one of the things I'm guessing, I cannot tell a lie, I didn't see all 100 of the harms you mentioned, but I'm guessing, since you're the ranking Democrat on the Small Business Committee in the Senate, you talked about the plight of small businesses with tariffs, and I'm sure you heard Trump on Meet the Press at the same time that he said he didn't know if he had to uphold the Constitution, the Fifth Amendment due process rights. He was asked by Kristen Welker, well, I'm just asking about small businesses. Are there any discussions about giving any relief to small businesses? Quote from Trump, they're not going to need it. Are they not going to need it, Senator Markey?
Well, right now, I'm being inundated with calls from small businesses all across Massachusetts. We have 730,000 small businesses in Massachusetts. Wow. We're a state of 7 million people. We have 730,000 small businesses. And although Trump might not understand this, 97% of all businesses who engage in trade are small businesses. Mm-hmm. And that represents 30% of all trade with countries around the world. So if you're a big business, you might be able to make it through. You can cut some corners over here and make it through this threat. But if you're a small business, you live week to week, month to month. You can't ride out a storm like this. And what Massachusetts, small businesses are telling me is that we need a complete and total change of direction by the Trump administration, or else we are going to have a catastrophe. We're going to have a liquidation event for small businesses, not just in Massachusetts, but across the country. That is the threat which we are running, which is why I've introduced a bill that would say to Trump that you must give a waiver to all small businesses in the United States of the impact of the tariffs. And I introduced that legislation yesterday. I held the press conference with Chuck Schumer, with Amy Klobuchar, with Tina Smith, and with a whole group of small businesses, including those from Massachusetts, standing behind me.
Not one Republican senator cares about small businesses in their district?
Well, I know a lot of Republicans care about it because the National Chamber of Commerce has asked Donald Trump to give a waiver for small businesses. So you can't get more Republican than the National Chamber of Commerce. And ordinarily, their wish is the command of Republicans. So my hope is that we will be able to find some Republicans who will stand up, because every time they go home, every weekend, they're hearing from their Rotarians, from their Kiwanians, from their local Chamber of Commerce about how devastating these tariffs are to them, how it threatens their very survival. And Congress is a stimulus response institution, and there's nothing more stimulating than people on Main Street talking to you. Not the NASDAQ, not the S&P 500. No, the real businesses that you get to talk to are the ones on Main Street.
Well, Senator Markey, I wonder about what it will take, because we're hearing, I know we're not supposed to be that worried about the stock market, but half of Americans have their retirement savings in the stock market, and they're very shocked about it. But I'm wondering, and Trump's poll numbers are going down, at what point, or if at any point, will the Republicans, at least in the Senate, stand up to the president as these businesses do suffer? Because from what I've read, some of them could be gone in a matter of weeks because they're so dependent on their imports from China.
Or their exports.
No, that's the still unanswerable question. On Sunday night, I was at the Kennedy Library for the awarding of the Profiles of Courage Award to Vice President Pence for what he did on January 6th. And he showed true courage. So my hope is this. There are Republicans of conscience. We just have to hope that they turn into Republicans of courage. And I think that this tariff issue is something that is ultimately going to weigh very heavily upon Republicans because that's their principal constituency. It's the National Federation of Independent Businesses. It's the Chamber of Commerce. That's who the Republican Party represents most significantly. And right now, they're in revolt against Donald Trump. They're in revolt against Lutnick and all of these advisors, which he has on this trade war. And I can't for sure predict the moment when it's going to happen, but I think that it definitely is something that is going to weigh very heavily upon them, especially as each week and month go by and Wall Street and others predict a coming recession, because the ones that get hurt the most are the people who own businesses on Main Street all across our country.
You know, Senator Markey, if we can be just self-centered just for a second, Marjorie and I have applied for 2 barista jobs in Malden. We're hoping you can give us a recommendation if this NPR thing doesn't work out. Obviously, you know what's going on with NPR and PBS. Our boss, Susan Goldberg, was here the other day to talk about the response to this. We keep asking the same question. It's almost like the small business question. Virtually every red state district is dependent upon a PBS or NPR station, which in many cases is the only broadcast station that's available to their constituents. Is it possible that federal funding for both, for the Corporation of Public Broadcasting, could disappear?
It's possible if, again, Republicans of conscience don't stand up. Republicans of courage don't stand up. I just ran down from the hearing that I was just in at 11:45 today, talking about the cuts to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, to NPR and to PBS. I just ran over from the hearing.
Thank you for that.
Just cross-examining the witnesses on that issue. It's absolutely something that Newt Gingrich and George W. Bush each made a top priority. And in each instance, we were able to find Republicans to partner with in order to save these institutions. And if you just take PBS, if you take WGBH, from 6 in the morning all day, it's just the children's television network. It's all the programming that for 2 generations, every parent in Greater Boston has put their children in, regardless of race, regardless of income. It's invaluable and it's free. That's the key. It is free to every one of those parents. And every child has been a beneficiary of that. And there's no exception, not only in Greater Boston, but all across our nation. So in addition to that, the NPR networks, let's just say in the most rural parts of Maine or South Dakota, they are where people go in order to get their news, in order to get their entertainment, because that network goes out to where commercial stations can't find enough advertisers to have the station be able to put on those kind of high quality programs. So historically, that's been the coalition. Last week, I sent a letter with Senator Murkowski, Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska on these issues. I've always tried to make this fight bipartisan. I've always led the fight to save CPB, to save PBS, to save NPR. That's been something I've been doing for decades. And right now, I'm working very hard in order to find Republican colleagues who understand this. But I also encourage the listeners in the most rural parts of the country to be calling your senators, be calling your House members, so that you tell them how valuable this is. They are being inundated on cuts to Medicaid. They should also be inundated on cuts to NPR, on cuts to PBS. So that's that's definitely something which people can't agonize. They've got to organize. This is an executive order that does not trump the appropriations of the House and Senate. So we're going to need House and Senate members to stand up and to vote to keep the funding for this incredible, valuable public media that has served generations of Americans so well.
We're talking to the United States Senator from Massachusetts, Ed Markey.
Senator Markey, we know you and Ayanna Pressley because Rümeysa Öztürk is in the Congresswoman's district. You were down there as well with her. She's a Tufts doctoral student who was disappeared off the street and sent to a detention center in Louisiana.
Jim McGovern was there too.
And that's right, Jim McGovern. We're going to speak about Jim McGovern more in a minute. But tell us what it was like to see her. I know the conditions are bad. She's had asthma attacks, talking about being too cold to sleep at night, not enough blankets. What was it like?
Well, first, she has a great spirit. She is behind barbed wire in a prison in the remotest part of Louisiana. The goal that the Trump administration has is to whisk students off of the streets of Massachusetts, and in this instance, moved her to Vermont and eventually took her down to Louisiana. She was dressed in an orange jumpsuit. She told us how originally they wouldn't even let her wear her hijab so that she would be able to be dressed as the fervent Muslim, which she is. But she told us a very disturbing story, and it was the number of asthma attacks that she's had already. She told us of how they put her originally in handcuffs and then in shackles to move her down to Louisiana. She told us about how when the women, there's 1,000 women in this prison in remote Louisiana, how at night when they ask for extra blankets, they don't receive them. When people, when some of these prisoners or detainees, as they call them, ask for special foods because of their religion, they don't receive them in a timely fashion. When they need medical attention, they don't receive the medical attention in a timely fashion. So this is a woman that truly is inspiring in terms of what she's responding to. And it all went back to an op-ed that she wrote in the Tufts newspaper, which is her First Amendment right. What she's being denied as well is her Fifth Amendment rights. So there was a court case just this morning. It just ended in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in New York, which covers Vermont. And the case just was heard, and her lawyers made the case that she should be sent back to Vermont. And so my hope is that those judges will act promptly in order to get her out of that prison and back to Vermont, and then hopefully released so that she can return to her family and her friends on the Tufts campus.
You know, Senator Markey, Marjorie mentioned that when you went to that Louisiana prison, you were joined by two of your colleagues, Ayanna Pressley and Jim McGovern. Congressman McGovern has been on the show many times. He's a person, I believe, of great principle. About a week or so ago, we read a horrible story about the death of his daughter, Molly, who was in her young 20s, just unimaginable loss. Did you happen to know the congressman's daughter?
Yeah, and Jim, of course, got the news on the day that Congresswoman Pressley and I returned from Louisiana.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And when we were in with these women in their cells, Jim was saying to the mothers who were imprisoned how much he identified with them, and because of his own children. He kept raising his love of his children and how much he knew those women loved their children and did not want to be separated. And by the way, there were pregnant women that we were meeting with as well who should not be in that facility. Ayanna kept raising that issue absolutely passionately. So I knew Molly as a young girl. I went to the funeral on Saturday in Worcester. This is a great family, and she was just an incredible young woman, a woman who just inspired everyone that she ever met in her entire life. Jim McGovern gave one of the most incredible eulogies I've ever heard in my entire life, but so didn't his wife, and so didn't their son, Patrick. They each just delivered a riveting message about the life of Molly and all that she meant to the entire community and everyone that she had ever met. So it was just, especially given where Jim and I and Ayanna had just been with these mothers who were separated from their children. It was just one of the most powerful experiences that I've ever had. And Bill Clinton came. He was there. Nancy Pelosi was there. Elizabeth Warren and I, our delegation, we sat there. But Worcester was there. And other parts of her life where she had gone to school in Massachusetts, they were all there as well to honor this great young woman.
Yeah, she had a very rare form of cancer, as I understand, and there were complications involved. Yeah.
So, Senator, this morning's Globe says Marty Walsh, former mayor of Boston, former labor secretary, now he's got something to do with hockey, making $4 million a year, not that we're jealous, said the Democrats don't have a message. The Globe also reports 30 city or town Democratic committees are very angry. The Democrats are not fighting enough. Specifically, some of them singled out the fact that Chuck Schumer is still the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, and they criticized him for going along with making sure the Republican budget plan a month or so ago had enough votes to pass. You did not join Leader Schumer in that vote. How do you respond to Walsh and the Democratic committees about what they consider to be the weakness of Democrats in office?
And by the way, thank you for pointing it out. I voted no.
I know
on that continuing resolution. I disagreed with Chuck Schumer on that. But Marty Walsh, no one better, always has his finger on the pulse of the people. And so this weekend, twice, I went over to Dempsey's on the Malden-Medford line to have breakfast while I was up there, just listening to people at Dempsey's, this breakfast place that I go to. And at the same time, I went to another half a dozen events in Massachusetts, listening to people as they are really expressing incredible concern about what the Trump administration is doing. So Marty is right. If we listen to the people, they will lead us. That's why it was so heartening to me when 100,000 people showed up on Boston Common and at the Boston City Hall Mall for the Hands Off rally, which I led walking down Tremont Street and spoke at that rally. It's so critical that we have people coming out to town meetings as well. I had one with 1,500 people in Malden just 3 weeks ago. There was no room. We had to go to 2 overflow rooms and move more television sets into it. So the people are speaking. They don't want Medicaid to be cut. 50% of all children in the United States.
But if I may interrupt, Marty Walsh's message is not that Trump is horrible. His message is that your fellow Democrats are not fighting hard enough. Do you agree with that message as well?
Well, you have to. Well, I would say you have to do both. You have to listen to the people, and you have to fight hard. Now, according to all of the polls, he is now down to 40% favorability. Mm-hmm. It's a start, but there's a lot more work to do, a lot more fight to do, which is why I brought out the amendment, no cuts to Alzheimer's research, and made all the Republicans vote no. It's why I brought out the amendment on the Senate floor saying you cannot disconnect the phones at the Social Security Administration, making it almost impossible for grandma and grandpa to call in to get their benefit. So I'm fighting every single day on the floor of the United States Senate. And I'm also going around the state, listening to and trying to rally people to this fight. So we need to help lead it. We need young people to read it. We need an uprising at the grassroots all across our country to help lead this. That's what 5051 is doing. Yeah. That's what Indivisible is doing. They're the ones that put on this incredible march just 3 weeks ago, in the beginning of April in Boston. And Marty Walsh, as usual, is right. He knows how to get this done, and that's what I'm trying to do every single day.
And you want to keep doing it. You're running for re-election. Are you too old to run for re-election and serve 6 more years, Ed Markey?
Well, I'm like Paul McCartney. I just keep rocking 8 days a week.
Yeah, a lot of people say you're like Paul McCartney I've spoken to. Go ahead.
So, this is the most energized I've ever been. This fight is bringing out the Malden in me. It's bringing out the fight for all these programs that affect communities like Malden. As I was saying, 50% of all children in America are on Medicaid. 50% of all children in America will be on SNAP, supplemental nutrition, at some point in their life. The cuts to Title I education funding, that's Malden. The cuts to the funding for special education for the kids that have disabilities, that's Malden. But it's every community. But disproportionately, it's going to hit those blue-collar and poorer communities. So that's what gets me up. That's what gets me into this fight every single day. It's the most energized I've ever been, because Trump is trying to destroy that opportunity ladder for the entire next generation of Americans. And yeah, they're disproportionately black and brown and poorer, but I'm fighting against Trump every day. That's my priority, and I do it to represent those who are going to be most harmed by his policies.
Well, Senator,
and not allow the funding to go to millionaires and billionaires.
Senator Markey, before you go, you also have been fighting hard for something that is near and dear to Jim Braude's heart.
That is correct.
He has been crusading along with you to make daylight saving time permanent, and now, out of the blue, I didn't know that President Trump felt so strongly about this. Apparently, he wrote on Truth Social that we should stop changing the clocks, big inconvenience for our government, and a very costly event. So,
love that guy.
So maybe, exactly. Could Donald Trump be the person that finally gets daylight saving time permanent across the line? What do you think?
As you know, when it passed 2 years ago on the Senate floor, it was Rubio, Markey.
That's right.
Who got it passed.
That's right.
It was the Bay State
Extending
and
it.
the Sunshine State. So we aligned on this. Now, I have disagreed with almost everything that Marco Rubio has done since he took over as Secretary of State. He's almost become a mini Trump in his foreign policy. But maybe, just maybe, on daylight savings time, he was able to have dawn break over Marblehead here and have the president finally understand how important daylight savings time is. So the more daylight we have is the more fun we have. The corners of your mouth turn upwards with a little bit of a smile when that sun is out after you get home from work. So that's something, but maybe Donald Trump and I, even though I'm not a golfer, maybe we can convince him to have more time away from Washington, just golfing out there at Mar-a-Lago and all the other resorts that he has. But maybe that's the one redeeming thing that Marco Rubio has done. Not cutting funding for USAID, not saying he's going to take over the Panama Canal, but daylight savings time.
So will you do me a favor, Senator? Say hello to Ringo for us, will you, when you see him? Senator
Love
Markey,
you guys.
Thanks for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Ed
you
Markey.
very much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
We've been speaking with United States Senator Ed Markey, and we thank him very much for taking the time to be with us. Okay, coming up after this quick break, we're going to talk to the Boston Foundation President and CEO Lee Pelton on the impact of Trump funding cancellations to nonprofits, and of course, the latest on the Trump-Harvard showdown. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Trusted, local news.
School districts are in the process of finalizing their budgets for next year.
GBH News.
State funding for public schools hasn't kept up with inflation.
Here for what matters to you.
Especially in Western Massachusetts and in Southern Massachusetts. They are experiencing the budget impacts.
Tightening school budgets could have significant impacts like larger class sizes and
GBH 89.7. Online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked /1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And M. Steinert & Sons, announcing the opening of their Waltham Piano Warehouse, offering new and used pianos, including Steinway and Steinway-designed Boston and Essex pianos. Appointment information at msteinert.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Margery Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Governor Healy will be with us on Friday from noon to 1. Andrea Campbell on the 13th at the library for an hour. And Josh Kraft will make his first visit to our show. He obviously is running against Michelle Wu, also on the 13th. We're joined now at the library by Lee Pelton. He's the president and CEO of the Boston Foundation, a member of GBH's Board of Trustees. Previously served as the 12th president of Emerson College. Recently starred in the revival of Carousel.
It was great.
And I have to say, Margie and I were in awe. You were I'm serious. You were fabulous. Wow. He's also, according to Boston Magazine, the city's 5th most influential Bostonian. Most notably, that's ahead of Governor Healy. I can imagine what those meetings are going to be like. In any case, Lee Pelton, congratulations and good to see you.
Well, after my precipitous fall from 3 to 6 last year,
you recovered.
I'm clawing my way back.
Yeah, it's about time. But you were, by the way, in all seriousness, you were the whole Carousel thing was great, and you were really terrific.
Well,
I mean, you really were. We were really impressed. It was great.
Okay, that was a great moment. That was a great moment. This is not such a great moment because I think this new survey talks about how devastated the nonprofits around here could be because of federal policy cuts in money to nonprofits. So what's going to happen?
Well, we have a whole Meeting the Moment program, and this is just one aspect of a multi-pronged program. But in February, we sent out a survey, I think 500 respondents, and asked them a series of questions about the current moment, and then we had a convening just yesterday, actually, where 350 people showed up at TBF.
Really?
Which is really our capacity there. And then another 850 people online.
Wow.
So we had 1.2 thousand people who showed up for this.
These are nonprofit leaders.
These are nonprofit leaders.
Yeah.
And others. It could have been open to anybody, but,
Yeah.
but principally nonprofit leaders. But it shows, the really interest in this. And it shows and demonstrates how folks are feeling impacted by the federal administration. And 90% of them said that they believed that, or know that they will be negatively impacted, the nonprofit leaders. And the same leaders said that they 90% believe that the community that they serve will be negatively impacted. And so those are the big outcomes. And another 64% said we thought they would be, terribly impacted, these communities.
Well, what does negatively impacted mean? They're going to have to cut staff, or they're going to have to shut down, or they're not going to
All of the above.
All the above.
All the things that you could imagine that could happen.
And Maura Healey has talked about how the Commonwealth of Massachusetts does not have the money to make up for gaps that are going to affect the government here. So the federal government is huge.
It is huge.
For nonprofits.
Now, and philanthropy will make up part of that gap. We are making up part of that gap, as you might imagine. But we can't do it all by ourselves. And that's the issue. And so we're going to see some nonprofits, especially the small ones, probably disappear and won't return. We may see some consolidation of some nonprofits. So those who are working in a similar spaces may come together and with a joint, a single and joint nonprofit rather than two or three.
Yeah.
I read the conclusions of this poll. I want to make clear, when you said originally losing federal funding, it's not just that. As Lee said, a lot of their clients are losing benefits, and a lot of their clients, we've heard this from teachers, doctors, whatever, not coming to appointments with a nonprofit to meet with them about a particular thing. So they're sort of getting people coming and going. And while I know it can't fill the gap, as Marjorie mentioned in terms of the state, nor can philanthropy alone, you put out what originally was intended to be $2 million in relatively small but critical grants to, I think, 77 nonprofits. And because of the need, you raised it, I think, to $2.6 million. Yeah. What are the kinds of nonprofits, and what were the criteria for selection? Because I know there were close to 500 applicants for the...
Yeah. Let me go back to the where we started.
Sure.
Let's be clear. This is an assault on civil society.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what there's no other way to describe it. It really is an assault, and it's deliberate and it's strategic. And it's meant to weaken certain parts of the world that we lived in. So with respect to our safety net grants, we've always had a safety net grant program. These are small grants, usually 2 years, 2-year cycles. And so we created a special safety net grant. This is one of two with $2 million. We put in $2 million, TBF, and then we catalyzed, as we say, another $600,000. That is to say, there were donors and others in the community who wanted to support what we're doing. So we ended up with $2.6 million. And this was really, again, to keep these small organizations alive and moving.
A lot of people are sitting here thinking, well, I don't have anything to do with nonprofits. Maybe this is what we need to do to save money or something. Give us an example or two of a nonprofit that people have come to rely on and they may not be able to in the future.
Well, there are a lot of them, and I would say that most of us probably don't give a lot of thought to nonprofit, except for those who benefit from those. There are immigrants who benefit from the nonprofits. There are certain sorts of community organizations that also benefit from these, and so they're really very meaningful and very varied.
Let me just read. You listed in a press release came out of your organization who got the 2.6 million grants. Let me just randomly read to answer Marjorie's question. This is just out of the middle here. Association of Haitian Women in Boston, Center to Support Immigrant Organizing, Children's Services of Roxbury, Chinese Progressive Association, the Ellie Fund. We were with the head of the Ellie Fund recently at a release of a podcast. GLBTQ, that may be a typo, but you know what I mean, legal advocates and defenders, on and on and on. So I think that's a great question. It's sort of like what Marjorie says about every time a political leader says constitutional crisis. What does that mean in real terms? Nonprofits touch virtually every aspect of everybody's life, and it's not just low and moderate income people, even though they may be the major beneficiaries. It's essentially everybody, Lee Pelton.
It is, but we've also funded, for instance, the civil rights, the Lawyers for Civil Rights, and helped fund them in their work. They held a 3-hour workshop with nonprofits and others, so that they would know what their legal rights were and how they could navigate during this time.
Farm groups, Pine Street Inn, Lydia Downey was. I mean, all these kinds of organizations. You know, while these threats are obviously very serious, I mean, to say the least, I was reading about a week or two ago that what was expected on Earth Day, a week or two ago, was a new, I don't know if it's a regulation is the right word, but a change in policy that would ultimately cause 501c3, which is the IRS statute that applies to nonprofits. Basically, what Trump allegedly wanted to do, but it didn't happen, but doesn't mean it's not going to happen, is eliminate the word climate from the work that recipients, that would allow people to get nonprofit status. That's the kind of thing that can totally gut. It isn't like I can make up my money with a $25,000 or $50,000 grant from you. Is it perceived in the nonprofit community this is the tack that he's ultimately going to take, totally wiping out whole parts of what people in the nonprofit world do?
Absolutely, it's already started, and Harvard's been in this fray as well. I'm going to say this with a note of caution. Because I don't want it to sound, overwrought or anything. But history tells us that you don't know that you're in an, authoritarian regime until it's too late. You don't know it until it's too late. And history also tells us that once that is established, it doesn't stop. It renews itself. And there is this sort of, I won't call this authoritarian, but there's the patina of authoritarianism here with our current administration.
I would say it goes beyond a patina. When the President of the United States says on a Sunday talk show, I don't know if I have to uphold the Constitution of the United States when it comes to due process. And I hope people are not upset that we quote Maria Ressa every day, because it was one of the most impactful 30 minutes we've spent in our work lives. Maria Ressa, who wrote a book, it's called How to Stand Up to Dictators, obviously after her experience with Duterte, and then won the Nobel Peace Prize, as she well deserved, talked about very convincingly how early on the path to authoritarianism, stopping it is so much easier, and it gets infinitesimally more difficult the further the country goes into that kind of mode. So when I hear people, I had dinner with people the other night who were talking about the midterms, what we're going to do in the midterms, who's going to win the midterms. I think there are serious questions as to whether or not we get to the midterms with this form of democracy.
Not to interrupt, but that's what I was talking to Carol Rose about from the ACLU before, and they do great work, the ACLU, but it's kind of like we're operating like this is normal times. So Trump is doing all these unconstitutional things, and no one is paying a price for it yet except the objects, like the people that are being deported or the nonprofits that are getting their money taken away, doing all these things that aren't even in his bailiwick. So we got to hurry up here.
We do, but I've being my characteristic circumspect here.
You're very circumspect. You're right.
But yeah, it is as you describe it. Yeah.
Somebody should be held in contempt of court. And they can't find them because money doesn't matter. Somebody's got to go to jail here. And I don't see that happening.
Circumspection is not our stock and trade.
I know.
I don't think we have time.
I know that. That's why I'm here to balance all that.
Thank you.
You know what Rümeysa said? She said we have till the summertime, and then it's gone.
It's gone.
Well, the head of that International Journalists Association said democracy will die in your country.
So we're sitting around here, debating. And,
you mentioned at Harvard in passing. We all know what happened last week, the $2 billion in cuts. Gruber, the president, who I think had been far too silent, decided to speak up, say we're not going to tolerate this. Yesterday, we had a couple of things happening. No more research grants until Harvard toes the line, says the Trump administration. And Bill Ackman, who has been the source of almost, in my opinion, everything unfortunate that has happened in Harvard in recent times, also announced that he thought that taking away the tax-exempt status of Harvard, which Trump announced he was going to try to do, even though, as far as I know, he doesn't work for the Internal Revenue Service that makes that determination. Ackman said he thought that was an appropriate remedy for the situation if Harvard continues down the same track here. We saw you a few months ago after Harvard President's Award. Is that what you had just won?
Yeah,
a
medal award.
It was a huge thing, and you obviously worked there. What's your big picture and small picture response to both the assaults on Harvard and the response as of the last 2 weeks from its president and the university itself?
Well, it's to bring Harvard to its knees so that it comes in compliance with the administration's strategy and its set of misguided goals. But what one never talks about is that there are these politically conservative universities, notoriously conservative. I could name some of them: Harding University, for instance, and Liberty University. Yeah. You remember that? You remember all those along the way?
Jerry Falwell.
But they are not getting the same sort of message.
Wonderful point.
They're not getting the same sort of message. So you have to understand that this is politicized. This is terribly politicized.
So you ran a university. Even if it turns out that the Garbers of the world know that if they fight, unlike Columbia, at the end of the day, their lawyers tell them they're likely to win. What's that interim period like when you're trying to run a school, make sure that research grants get continued as best as possible? How do you do the job?
Well, for a small place like where I used to be, it would be hard to do because there's no scenario planning that you really can't. You can do it, but none of it would look very, fruitful.
How about a big place like Harvard?
Well, yeah. They may have. They have lots of. They have a big endowment, for instance, and things like that that might help them get
But
through.
all research grants, which was the announcement, is monstrous, multi-billions of dollars.
It is.
Well, obviously the researchers can't work there if they can't get the grants, and they're going to have to go someplace else. And you read all these stories about people being recruited to other countries. Like, I don't think I want to be going to China, but, Paris wouldn't be bad to go do my research someplace there,
Imagine that. This is an attack on colleges and universities that are so central and fundamental to our democracy. However you think about our democracy as a form of governance, as a way of life, as a value, it's really remarkable.
Do you think the American people, we've talked about this ad nauseum almost every day, how it's so obvious that anti-Semitism, which is the cover for what Trump's doing, has absolutely nothing to do with his agenda, because you don't hang out with white supremacists if you're concerned about anti-Semitism. Do you think the American people, I know you're not a pollster, but is your sense that they get what's really going on and what this is all really about? Or do you think they're buying the anti-Semitism line?
The answer is, depends on who you talk to. I think there's some people who are sitting in the bleachers and really welcome these changes. They don't quite understand, I think, the outcome and the consequences of what's being proposed. But we have imposed. But we have a very revengeful president, and this is all about vengeance and his own personal ego.
Do you worry that there are consequences for you, I don't mean you, maybe you personally, but for the Boston Foundation and its grantees when you speak like you're now speaking?
I do, but I'm not going to stop. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to stop. Yeah. Somebody's got to stand up. So do I worry about it? Of course I do. But I'm not going to stop. I think this is the time not to mute our voices, but to speak out wherever we can and whenever we can.
Talking to Lee Pelton.
You know, as a text, someone's just saying that there was a devastating letter just posted to Mass MoCA's website about a canceled grants up there. And that's, you've talked about that place many times, how much you love going up
Fabulous.
there.
Well, I mean, he is attempting to kill all funding for National Endowment of the Arts, National Endowment of Humanities, which does lots of museums, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which is the primary federal funding source for libraries. You are deeply involved in the arts, I know, both personally and professionally. What's your, I mean, it's almost a stupid question to ask, but what's your reaction to this? And do you worry that ultimately the deal makers, whoever they may be, decide they can't win everything, and that something like arts and humanities and libraries may be what ends up going, you know?
They may, I don't know. I can't speak for them. But this is a president who has, I think he's now appointed himself in a lot of different places. And
he's chair of the board of the Kennedy Center. If you want to perform there, you got to go with him as the chair of the board. By the way, speaking of that, we had Kamau Bell on yesterday, who was fabulous, who decided the Kennedy Center. He took some heat. He said, you know, there was a big national debate. Do you think that's the right decision for, not just him, for performers? Some have decided to continue to perform because they want that platform to be critical should they choose to be. Others have decided, I want nothing to do with a place like the Kennedy Center. What advice would you give somebody if they came to you?
I can't. I mean, I think, I don't want to dictate how other people respond to this. But I can manage how I respond to it, and I can manage how I think about it and speak out about it.
You were in Carousel, do you remember? It was a long time ago?
Yeah.
Like 3 weeks ago?
We saw you in Carousel.
Okay, if the leaders, we had the, as you know, the brilliant director here with you that day. Right. I'm serious. If the Carousel was you were involved in that, was scheduled to be at the Kennedy Center, and the director, the producers, whomever, the funders said, what do you think, Lee Pelton? Should we be there and make a point, or should we decide we want nothing to do with this guy who attacks the arts with all of his passion? What would you recommend?
Well, my inclination would be to go there.
And why is that?
Well, because I'm not there for the chair. I'm there for the audience, and for the engagement with the arts and engagement with this particular project. And I would hope and would expect that the audience would be politically diverse.
What do you? I know you fairly well. I know you think about these things every waking moment, probably with non-waking moments. Right. What worries you most on whatever this is, May 6th?
I think what worries me most is the devastation that is likely to happen to these small nonprofits, and likely to happen to the communities and the people and the institutions that they serve. And if you want to know what keeps me up at night, it's that.
Yeah.
It's that loss. And it's cruel. And it's just cruel and brutal.
We're glad you're there. Check out the work that the Boston Foundation does at tbf.org and keep doing it. And it's great to see you, Lee Pelton. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Lee Pelton. What, number 5? You're number 5? He's number 5.
He's 5, yeah.
He's number 5 of the most influential people in Massachusetts. We're lucky he still shows up here being number 5. Thank you very much for coming, Lee Pelton. He's also the president and CEO of the Boston Foundation. We should say that's the Boston Magazine, most influential people. He's also a member of GBH's Board of Trustees, and he previously served as the 12th president of Emerson College, and as I said before, the 5th most influential Bostonian, according to Boston Magazine. Okay, coming up after a quick break, just enough time left for 2 more things. You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, there's another court hearing today in the case of detained Tufts student Rümeysa Öztürk. We'll have the latest. Homeland Security agents are now doing unplanned wellness checks on immigrant children. And the desire to have kids can be overwhelming, but more people are on the fence than we realize. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping you achieve your vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding you from design to completion with showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com. And GM Roth Design Remodeling, dreams delivered, with custom kitchens, bathrooms, and additions. Serving New England for over 39 years. Learn more at gmroth.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. It is time for two more things. One of those two things will be Marjorie. Hello, Marjorie.
Hello, Jim.
Yeah.
So I want to talk briefly about the Met Gala.
The Met Gala?
The Met Gala, yes.
Wow.
Here's why.
I saw the pictures.
Usually, the Met Gala, people make fun of it. All these rich people running around these ridiculous outfits. We take a bunch of pictures of all these people. Well, this year, a little bit different. The tricky politics of this year's Met Gala is the headline for the New York Times, because when they began planning for the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute last October, that was before Trump became the president of the United States, and of course declared a war on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and any programming related to race, especially in the cultural institutions. Well, the Met Gala had planned a celebration called Superfine Tailoring Black Style of Black men's fashion. The way black men have used fashion as a tool, this is from the Times, as a tool of self-actualization, revolution, subversion throughout American history and the black diaspora. And so they stuck with that despite Trump's attack on all these things. And as somebody wrote in the Times saying, it's like the Met Gala has gone from this ridiculous thing we made fun of to look like the resistance and to really doing the right thing. They had all these black designers on the opening party's red carpet, more black stylists than ever, celebrities, people like Chris Rock, Al Sharpton, Colin Kaepernick, Dwayne Wade, Chance the Rapper, a whole bunch of these rappers showed up.
Jalen Hurts, the quarterback of my favorite team.
That's right.
Eagles,
they were all
champions.
there. It was a very black evening, and it was pretty gutsy because they didn't have to do this. As somebody said, this feels way bigger than just fashion. This was the culture critic that was there, putting black style out front and center, sends a real message. And I also wanted to mention that somebody else who was quoted there, who happens to be from Rosendale, who happens to be my daughter's best friend from kindergarten, who is a big deal now. She's a big deal now in the black fashion world. That's right. Her name is Taylor DeMori, and she's from the famed DeMori Morrison family in Rosendale. She was on the red carpet last night. Here's what she had to say. I have immense respect for the fact that they've decided to have this conversation and stand strong in the face of that risk. And the risk, of course, is that they'll be attacked by President Donald Trump. So congratulations to the Met for not backing down. Congratulations to Taylor and the entire DeMori Morrison family, I should say, over in Rosendale.
What was your kid's reaction to?
Well,
Taylor
I showed you the picture of Taylor on the red carpet with her husband in there, and my daughter's like screaming in the background. She sees Taylor looking absolutely gorgeous in this beautiful back dress, and her husband, who's become one of the premier designers for young black men in America. So that's why they were at the Met Gala.
So I only have a minute left because Marjorie talked too long. No, it's okay. I'll just do this in quiz form rather than what I intended to do. Obviously, there was $1 billion left over from the millionaire's tax, and everybody says we should use it as best we can for the critical transportation education purposes for which the voters voted for it, not to mention the fact there are a lot of federal cuts that need to be filled in. Would you say that building a $25 million parking garage in the home district of the Speaker of the House would be one of those priorities, Marjorie?
I would say no, Jim.
Okay, I have another question for you. When the House of Representatives debated the $25 million, what was that like?
I don't believe they debated it.
There was no debate. When the public had an opportunity to comment on the $25 million for the parking garage next to a new hospital, what was the public's reaction?
I guess Mariano didn't care what the public thought about it at all.
Well, because the public didn't know, they couldn't comment on it. $25 million, if you believe something merits taxpayer dollars, you know what you should do? Let the taxpayers know about it And if it's good enough to be funded, then you should defend it in public. But as we know, least transparent legislature in the United States of America does it again.
Another proud moment, Jim.
Thank you.
On Beacon Hill.
I'm done.
Okay, coming up after the 1 o'clock news, we're going to talk with Chuck Collins. We're talking about him about the proposed expansion of Hanscom Field and the use of private jets in Massachusetts. He's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting from the Boston Public Library.
Do your part to support the programs you love by becoming a GBH Sustainer. Sustainers make easy monthly donations that keep the news you trust on the air, month after month, year after year. Enrolling is simple at gbh.org/sustainer.
Support for GBH comes from you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And Bryant University, where tomorrow's leaders can discover that beautiful grit gets you in the know, the room, and in demand. Learn more at bryant.edu.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. Chuck Collins from the Institute for Policy Studies is here on the impact American oligarchs Musk, Bezos, and Zuckerberg are having on Trump 2.0, and how a group of lesser-known but still uber-wealthy forces are trying to expand Bedford's Hanscom Field to accommodate more fossil-fueled private jets.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we'll end the show with commencement season. What's a lasting piece of advice you remember from that period in your life, leaving school behind and entering the quote-unquote real world? Or what do you wish someone had told you? Meanwhile, Jim would like to know why his alma mater hasn't asked him to speak yet. Maybe you have some thoughts. Commencement speeches and you call or text 877-301-8970. That's the third hour. Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump's showering praise on his latest guest at the White House. He says Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is a very good person and predicts the U.S. and Canada will stay friends, quote, regardless of anything. Trump possibly alluding to their dispute over tariffs and his persistent notion that Canadians would be better off as Americans.
There are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem.
Trump says it would be a good marriage between friends. On behalf of Canada's electorate, Carney declined.
Having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale.
Carney's election was widely seen in Canada as a referendum on Trump. After 2 rounds of voting, Germany's parliament elected conservative politician Friedrich Merz as the country's newest chancellor. Here's NPR's Rob Schmitz.
It was the first time in Germany's history that a candidate for chancellor failed to win on the first ballot. But after 2 rounds of voting, Merz was confirmed as Germany's 10th chancellor, winning 325 out of 630 votes in parliament. Because the votes were secret ballots, it was not immediately clear, and might never be known, who had defected from Merz's camp to vote against him. His coalition is led by his center-right Christian Democratic Union and its Bavarian sister party, the CSU. They're joined by the center-left Social Democrats, led by outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who lost the national election in February. Rob Schmitz, NPR News, Berlin.
The U.S. intelligence community says it does not believe Venezuela's president controls a criminal gang that operates in the United States. This directly contradicts claims by President Trump about the gang. More from NPR's Greg Myrie.
President Trump says Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, controls the gang, Tren de Aragua, or TDA, which is active in the U.S. Trump cites this as his administration deports alleged gang members to a prison in El Salvador under an 18th century law, the Alien Enemies Act. But a declassified memo from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence reached the opposite conclusion. It says, quote, the Maduro regime probably does not have a policy of cooperating with TDA and is not directing TDA movement to and operations in the United States. The memo was obtained by the Freedom of the Press Foundation and shared with NPR. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Washington.
U.S. stocks are trading lower this hour, with the Dow down 285 points, or roughly 0.5% at 40,932. The S&P is down 0.5% as well, and the Nasdaq has fallen more than 0.5%. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. A U.S. appeals court has upheld a Boston federal judge's ruling to block the Trump administration's effort to revoke legal immigration status for certain Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. The people in question are living legally in the U.S. through a humanitarian parole program. Attorney Esther Sung with the Justice Action Center is representing the immigrants.
The practical import of the First Circuit's decision was that the Trump administration may not prematurely revoke the individual grants of CHNV parole for some 400,000 parole beneficiaries here in the United States.
The First Circuit judges say the Trump administration only has the power to revoke legal status for the immigrants in question on a case-by-case basis, not as an entire group. Former Labor Secretary and former Boston Mayor Marty Walsh has weighed in on what he thinks the Democratic Party needs to do to get its mojo back. During an interview on the People's Cabinet, a podcast hosted by his former chief of staff, Dan Coe, Walsh said Democrats need to get back to talking to people, not in town halls, but in coffee shops and other places within their communities. Says Democrats should be going to their constituents rather than the other way around. His recommendation to current elected Democrats is to think about their first political race and what issues voters wanted solved. In sports, Red Sox host Texas at Fenway Park tonight, 6:45 start. In the forecast, we do got scattered showers for the rest of the day today, high about 66 degrees. That's where we are right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for chefs and designed for restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. A couple of programming notes. We're going to be joined this Friday by Governor Maura Healey here at the Boston Public Library for another edition of Ask the Governor. On May 13th, we'll be joined by the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, and Josh Kraft, who's running for mayor, will also join us on May 13th here at the library. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. We've discussed a number of times on this show with you, with the governor, with others, the proposed expansion of the airport at Hanscom Field, which would add more than 500,000 square feet of luxury jet hangar space, double the current private jet infrastructure. It's drawn vocal opposition from locals, framing the issue as one of environmental urgency and of class consciousness. The decision for approval or not is now organization, the acronym of which is MEPA, which conducts environmental impact reviews of development projects. An organization called the Institute for Policy Studies has researched the flight data out of Hanscom to try to inform the whole debate. We're joined now at the library desk by Chuck Collins, co-author of Hanscom Air Reports for the Institute for Policy Studies, where he's director of the program on inequality and the common good. Remember the common good in the old days, Marjorie? I remember that. Chuck, it's great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Good to see you, Jim.
It's passé now, Jim.
Not with us, it isn't.
But I'm so glad, Chuck, for you to come in about this, because we do get a lot of people down here every time the governor's here that are concerned about Hanscom Field and the expansion up there. So explain what's going on, what the issues are up there.
Well, Hanscom Field is the largest private jet airport in New England. 38,000 private jets coming and going every year. Some private developers getting approval from Massport have proposed to build this huge hangar expansion. And not just the communities, but the people who care about the climate across the Commonwealth, across the region, are alarmed. It's sort of as if you were to say to me, well, let's build a coal plant in the middle of Boston Harbor, and it's going to create a lot of jobs. You might be skeptical, right? Well, it's the same thing. We basically have a private jet airport that serves the wealthiest, most powerful people in the Commonwealth who are used to getting their way, and they want to massively increase the number of private jet operations. We estimate some 6,000 more private jet operations if they expand these hangars. So it'd be like exploding a carbon bomb of emissions as the rest of the communities in the Commonwealth are trying to reduce their carbon emissions.
And why are private jets so bad emissions-wise?
They are the super emitters. They are the least ecological form of transportation. The growth, and this is kind of mirrors the growing inequality of wealth and power in the U.S. The billionaires want their jets. They might want one or two. They emit 20, 30 times the emissions of an ordinary passenger on a commercial flight. And our study showed that half those flights are to recreation and luxury destinations, like Bedford to Nantucket, Bedford to Martha's Vineyard, Aspen, Jackson Hole. You get the idea.
Yes.
These are not like the hard-charging CEOs. There's a few of them. But these are largely recreation. So we think it's kind of indefensible to expand it during a climate emergency, which I think we're living through. And I think more people will recognize that. In a climate emergency, it's indefensible to expand the most luxury polluting form of transportation.
But if it doesn't go here, I don't know what else in the Hanscom world of these kinds of airports exists. But let's assume that ultimately MEPA rejects the approval request. Do these planes not go elsewhere in the region, or what's the outcome that you would find satisfactory, even if you win this hearing?
It's kind of like, should we build a coal plant in another place?
Well, that's exactly what the question is.
So no. I mean, the coalition, there's this really great grassroots coalition. They don't have a lot of resources, but basically they're saying, stop private jet expansion at Hanscom or anywhere. Hanscom is the largest private jet airport in New England. There are other airports that are looking at the same issue. They're getting pressured because there are wealthy built people who want to have their private jets and they want to have them close to wherever they live. So we're part of them. At the national level, we're fighting airport expansions all over the country for private jets.
Well, if you're against expansion and saying you're against expansion there and it shouldn't happen anywhere else, why is your not bottom line demand there shouldn't be an airport with private jets to begin with?
Well, I think the first step is to stop the expansion.
Okay.
We have huge demand. The United States is like the leading global power. Private jet travel has increased 45% in the last 5 years. So that's a lot more private jet activity.
By the way, we should make clear.
Because everybody's getting richer and richer. Is that your theory?
As wealth flows to the top.
Okay.
We're talking about oligarchy.
Get your own
this
jet.
is a symptom of oligarchy in our backyard.
Well, but in fairness, we should say this proposal predates Donald Trump. It became in the Biden era with Democratic governors of Massachusetts. What do other countries that are much more concerned about the environment than the United States is? What do they do with private jets?
Well, first of all, private jets don't even pay their real fair share of the use of the airspace. So private jets are like 7% of all aviation. They pay like 0.6% of the cost. So other countries require private jets to pay their real costs and environmental costs. Okay. Senator Markey, who was on here, has championed a private jet tax, fuel tax, greatly increasing it so private jet operators can pay their real fair share, and that money can go to green transit and green buses and things that actually help most people.
Also, before Marjorie's going to play with one of the times we asked Governor Healy about this, what she said in a minute. Before we get to that, though, is there some sort of tax exemption in the United States, too, for the purchase of private jets? Is there some tax exemption?
Yeah, actually, under the 2017 Trump tax plan, which has to be renewed now, you can buy your jet, Jim, and accelerate the depreciation in 1 year. So most businesses, you have to have 6 years to pay off your equipment, but a private jet purchase can be expensed in 1 year.
And how does that help them in the English language for people?
It basically says, we're going to subsidize your purchase, because the reality is the private jet isn't losing value. but you can expense it. You basically can write it off in 1 year. So it's like we're subsidizing these billionaires buying their jets.
Here is that clip. Jim mentioned Governor Healy. She was back on a show in February of 2024 talking about an audience member, or answering an audience member's question about Hanscom Field's expansion, and not giving a personal opinion on the issue. Here she is.
I'm certainly well aware of the concerns about emissions caused generally, but certainly from our transportation industry. I'm absolutely aware of and sensitive to that. As you also know, this matter is before our office in terms of MEPA review right now. So I'll make any announcements at the appropriate times through that process.
Does that mean, when you just said a minute ago, you'll take a position before MEPA, as it's called, as to what you would like them to do? Is that what we should...
No, I trust my team and the experts evaluating this, so that's under review. I think he wanted me to weigh in, and all I'm saying is I'm not going to get ahead of our administrative agency on that.
Why do you think the governor is not getting ahead of her administrative agency from an environmental perspective here?
She wants their process to play out. She wants them to poke at this proposal, which is the proposal that the developers put forward. And we should say one of them is Jeffrey Leerink, who is a venture capitalist, Silicon Valley Bank, Steward Healthcare.
Heard of them.
You've heard about them, right? We hear a lot about Ralph De La Torre. We should be hearing a little bit about Jeffrey Leerink. Their proposal is so full of magical thinking, if you will. They're basically saying, we're going to build this new capacity and the number of flights will go down and emissions will go down. That is just... We have independent research that shows that's not the case.
You seem
the
to be...
governor, I should just say...
You seem to be defending the governor's failure to take a position here. Is that... tell me if I'm misstating what you're saying, but aren't there a multitude of issues where a chief executive, there's an issue before some body, some like MEPA, could be the Public Utilities Commission, whatever, where a governor often says, here's what I think the position is. I don't have the final authority, but here's what I'd like him to do. Is that not true?
Well, I think she wants her, as I understand it, she wants her environmental folks to really scrutinize and look at this and reject it on its grounds.
You think she does?
Well, I think she's going to do the right thing. I hope she's going to do the right thing. She has to just choose between, sort of the billionaire polluters and the rest of the Commonwealth. I hope she comes down on this. She can come down tomorrow, though. And I should say, we're getting to the point now where it would be useful to hear from the governor on where she stands on this, because she has a huge impact on this. Massport has done its part.
What'd they say?
Well, when under Charlie Baker, Massport sort of pushed through this basic concept, this basic expansion. Now it's going through the environmental review and others. But the governor can step in at any point and say, look, things have changed. We know more about the emissions. We know about the science. We know about the harms. And it's indefensible when everyone else in the Commonwealth is trying to figure out how to reduce their emissions to let a bunch of billionaires fly from Bedford to Nantucket.
And would that kill it, or that would just be the opinion of a powerful elected official? Doesn't ultimately the decision rest with MEPA, or is that naive?
It's not. MEPA doesn't have decision-making power. Who has power? It's a little fuzzy. Massport as a board has said green light so far. The governor can weigh in. The developer can change the proposal or
Could
withdraw.
the governor kill it tomorrow?
Doesn't necessarily have that power, as I understand it.
Okay.
What about the sustainable aviation fuel?
No, before we get to that, can I ask one more question about this?
Yeah.
And then we'll get to that. I can't remember who the guest is, and I don't mean to be disrespectful. I just can't remember who made an argument as to why it was the right decision to allow the expansion. And one of the arguments they used was this thing about cutting down what they call ferry flights,
Right.
which is this notion that, hey...
which is different than the drag queen flights.
If they... no, F-E-R-R-Y, but thank you. The notion being, correct me if I'm wrong, well, if they can't be in a hangar overnight at Hanscom, they're going to be a hangar overnight at another airport, and they're going to have to fly to Hanscom in the morning or whenever it is to pick up their passenger, deliver their passenger back to Hanscom, and then fly back to the airport where they're hangared. So not only are you not going to save by not allowing the expansion on the energy front, but you're going to suffer because of this. Is that BS, or is there merit to that?
It's big BS.
Why?
Because And we studied 18 months of flights at Hanscom. We were looking for ferry flights based on the definition you said.
Yeah.
You know, and we've identified about 20 out of over a year and a half of operations. One of them was Arthur S. Demoulas. Remember him?
He was the loser.
He was the
Market
loser.
Basket,
The
right?
loser.
He lost. He went off and bought
his cousin.
private jet.
Yeah.
Arthur T. runs Market Basket.
Yeah.
Arthur S. lost, bought himself a jet. So he
Makes you feel
gets
better
in and off.
when you lose a legal battle.
Exactly.
Nothing like it.
Nothing a little.
So wait, in a year and a half, there were only 20 ferry flights?
That's
the whole
what
year
we
and a half?
found. Another study, same thing.
Okay.
I would say to the developers, show us. They have a kind of inflated definition of what they call a ferry flight. Like if you fly from New York to meet with your private equity firm and go home the same day, that's not a ferry flight. That's a short hop, quick
What
flight.
I described as a ferry flight. Did I get it right or I didn't?
I think yeah.
Okay.
So, Arthur Demoulas gets off at Hanscom, and his plane goes and gets parked in Nashua. That's a ferry flight because he doesn't have a hangar at Hanscom. It's, there's terrific independent research. If the developers keep making that argument, they actually have to show some evidence, and they are not.
If real people, as have happened in surrounding communities, want to weigh in, do they address their comments to MIPA? Is that what they do at this point?
There will be another round. So Melissa Hoffer, the head of the environmental affairs, basically sent them back to the...
She's the woman who has the sort of the overarching sort of energy czar, for lack of a better expression, that looks at the energy impacts of decisions in all the secretariats in the state. Go ahead.
Yeah, and she said, look, you need to respond to the independent research. You need to show us, you need to answer a whole bunch of questions. So she sent them back. They're going to come back sometime in the coming months with a revised, DER environmental statement. And then the public will again have a chance to give input. Check out, Stop Private Jet Expansion, that website. You can learn about the process, get information, and stay connected because it's a citizens' fight. It's really about communities, the Commonwealth, against the billionaire jets.
Got it. You wanted to ask about the fuel.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that they're saying they're going to do. They're going to use sustainable aviation fuel at these on these private jets. I think you don't buy it.
Well, I actually co-authored a study on sustainable aviation fuels, and it is scientifically possible. You could probably fly a plane with pig fat and compost and a few other things. You can create but here's the thing. There is no scalable alternative to kerosene fuels that is going to be put in place at the speed of climate change. And so that doesn't mean it's not technologically possible. They did fly a plane from London to JFK with using, pig fat and that sort of thing. They used everything they had. But the trade-offs are how much land would be required for crops, biofuels. We've heard, about ethanol. It would be 140% of all the land currently in corn in the United States to meet the current aviation needs. So it's magical thinking. It's really important to talk about it, though, and invite people in to talk about this, because you're going to hear, and even our good friends and people who care about the environment are really attached to this idea of sustainable aviation fuel.
What I wonder down the road, obviously it's a ways away, but we have electric cars now. What is?
Is there a battery problem with that? A size problem?
Yeah, I don't worry about electric planes.
I know.
Right.
Is that
so there is such a thing as electric planes. They are small craft.
Okay.
There are going to be electric planes that are going to go to Nantucket from Logan, and they're being built in Vermont, and but they're never going to be able to lift those big planes.
Okay.
There's not a substitute for kerosene-based fuel when it comes to that. And I'm afraid what's going to happen is they're going to say sustainable aviation fuels. That's the answer. We're just going to unplug the fossil fuels and plug in the sustainable fuels, and we're all going to be flying the same amount. And that is actually not going to work.
Okay.
We've studied it.
Chuck Collins from the Institute for Policy Studies.
So you've written a book, Burned by Billionaires. I see it right there on the desktop counter. You've given a lot of thought to the oligarchy. Are we there yet?
Well, yeah, and that book doesn't come out till the fall. But if you think about, we've been living through 40 years of growing concentration of wealth and growing concentration of power
since Reagan.
So it's a slow, it's not like one day you wake up and democracy's gone and it's an oligarchy, although Lee Pelton, I think, was giving us the we're on the brink argument there. But, I think we're darn close of a political system captured by the wealthy. And the definition of an oligarchy is it's not only a society ruled by the wealthy few, it's a society that serves the rich, not against the interest of the common good. That's, I guess, how we started the conversation, the commonwealth. And, that's where we're heading. So private jet expansion at Hanscom Field is a symptom of an oligarchy. What kind of society would say, let's grow crops for jet fuel, and let's take land out of food and put it in jet fuel, and let's not build green transportation but expand private jets? Looks like an oligarchy, smells like an oligarchy.
Do you care about the mere fact that these people are in charge, or do you care because of what they do? Because I'm just thinking, when we all heard the reports prior to the swearing in on January 20th, more billionaires in the cabinet than any cabinet in American history, Trump was still as popular as ever. It was only after the Musks and the others started doing Doge. Zuckerberg and Bezos are on bended knee at the inauguration, given $1 million each. So is it their existence in positions of power? Maybe this doesn't make sense, this question. Or is what they do, or do you believe that if they're in positions of power, this is automatically what they're going to do? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I think so. I mean, it's a system of concentrated wealth and power. And what I would argue is it actually touches everything we care about. The environment, we're talking about that now, but healthcare, the capture of our hospital system, steward healthcare. This is what happens when the oligarchs start to treat our healthcare system as a wealth extraction platform. You care about animals and pets? Guess what? Private equity billionaires are moving into the veterinary hospital sector.
Incredible.
And they know we love our animals.
Yeah,
the dentist.
The dentist.
My local dentist just got bought out by a private equity firm. So realize, there's this encroachment that's happening until we push back. And to Senator Markey's credit, he has been out there on the healthcare front, not just because of Stewart, but because of what's happening to the whole health system, and saying, maybe these billionaire predators shouldn't be owning our healthcare system.
By the way, we didn't have time to bring this up, but speaking of Stewart, one of the things that he and Elizabeth Warren did is they sent a letter to the Department of Justice, asked for a criminal prosecution of Ralph DeLatorre. The incredible thing, despite the brilliant reporting by the Globe, which made it, and Brian McGrory, who's, after his time at the Globe, wrote those great columns about DeLatorre to start this whole thing. The Globe was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for that reporting. My understanding is the only indictments against either DeLatorre or his number two, who I think lives in Brookline, by the way, is in Malta. And because I assume we don't have some sort of reciprocity treaty with Malta, they're not being returned there or transported there.
It's because we move like molasses.
Well, do you think we're ever going to move?
System,
Why do you think we're ever going to move against DeLatorre?
I hope we are going to move against DeLatorre, but I think the court system in the United States has got to step on it because this is not a normal time. And to see him getting away with that, I think is so... he's over there at the dressage event with his wife, at the Versailles Palace in Paris.
Well, somebody's got to go, Marjorie.
Speaking of private jets, he's jetting around the world. He's also bought a $40 million yacht with the people's money, if you will, the Stewart Healthcare funds. He gives charitable...
People are dying in his hospitals because they don't have basic equipment that is life-saving and would have been life-saving.
The young mother died.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping a good investigative reporter will look at who's Jeffrey Lyrink. If there's anybody out there, I have a whole file on Jeffrey Lyrink, who helped DeLatorre and Stewart Healthcare sell off or buy up a bunch of hospitals in Utah. And he's part of this. He's part of that private equity venture. He's the developer of the Hanscom North Airfield project.
Where's he live?
He lives in Brookline.
Oh, he does?
Yeah.
Brookline is a hotbed, apparently, of corruption.
Right. It must be my next-door neighbor.
His co-developer owns the Cadillac dealership down on Route 1.
What's his private jet like up there in Hanscom? Do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah?
I haven't been invited to go for a ride.
No,
but,
you see these things. They're pretty snazzy, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
After you stand
I've been on a ton of private jets.
After you stand in line at Logan and they take your water bottle and frisk your grandmother, you kind of have private jet fantasies. It's understandable, but it's not really where we should be going as a society.
Yeah, a lot of celebrities have them.
How do people find your research, Chuck Collins?
Inequality.org.
Oh, that's a great
good one.
website. Wow, inequality.org. You do fabulous work. Stay in touch with us. Great to see you.
Thanks,
Chuck
Jim.
Collins.
Thanks, Marjorie, for having me.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah.
And good luck with everything.
Thanks.
Chuck Collins is director of the program on inequality and the common good of the Institute for Policy Studies, where he co-edits inequality.org. And the book is going to come out in, when did you say, in the fall? Yeah. Okay. What's it called?
Thank you.
Read it in front of me, Jim.
It's called Burned by Billionaires,
Burned
How
by
Concentrated
Billionaires.
Wealth and Power Are Ruining Our Lives and Planet by Chuck Collins. Coming out in the fall. Thanks for the book. Can I just say one more thing? Chuck, we didn't have time to talk about one other piece you wrote a couple of months ago about the cutting of thousands of jobs at the Internal Revenue Service.
Right.
And while a lot of typical taxpayers cheer, what it's basically going to mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Chuck, is the auditing and oversight of the richest people who have the most complicated tax forms is virtually going to disappear, which I think I heard in the radio this morning will cost the federal coffers roughly $160 billion over 10 years. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, the kind of hidden wealth, the whole infrastructure of people who help the rich dodge taxes has just metastasized. And for some ultra-wealthy people, taxation at the federal level is almost optional. And the only way to restore the balance is to enforce. The IRS is completely outgunned on enforcement.
Yeah.
They don't have the expertise. They don't have the people who understand the shell games that are being played. And so if you dismantle the IRS, you basically let a bunch of wealthy oligarchs run free and take their money elsewhere.
Yeah,
As Chuck leaves, we should just say he knows of what he speaks. He doesn't like going into this, but I'll just say very briefly, he happened to be an heir of a very wealthy entity that all of you have heard of, and he gave it all away, which I think is a fine start to your wonderful career.
Well, you're going to say which wealthy entity we've all heard
Well,
of?
we can't say it's Oscar Mayer, right? I mean, you can
That's
say
right.
Okay, it's great to see you, Chuck
I got
Collins.
to
Be
get
well.
in the Wienermobile and head home, so catch you later.
Believe me, if it was here, I'd get in there with you.
We go for a ride.
Take care,
Okay.
Chuck.
See you.
soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Chuck Collins is director of the program on inequality and the common good of the Institute for Policy Studies, where he co-edits inequality.org. Okay, coming up, it is commencement season. So we're going to open the lines after this break to get your thoughts on commencement speeches, if you even remember yours. And we're going to play you some of the best commencement speeches ever given. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7, parts of the speeches anyway. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, there's another court hearing today in the case of detained Tufts student Rümeysa Öztürk. We'll have the latest. Homeland Security agents are now doing unplanned wellness checks on immigrant children. And the desire to have kids can be overwhelming, but more people are on the fence than we realize. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And The Huntington with The Light in the Piazza, a new production of Adam Guttle's Tony Award-winning score and Craig Lucas's profound book. May 8th through June 15th at the Huntington Theater, huntingtontheater.org. And Cambridge School of Culinary Arts in Porter Square, offering private cooking events for your next team-building activity, family reunion, birthday party, or night out. You can learn more at cambridgeculinary.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The governor joins us here on Friday from noon to 1. We'll also be back. Is tomorrow Wednesday? Yeah, we'll be back tomorrow Wednesday as well. So it's commencement season. This is sort of one of those moldy old chestnuts, but it's always fun, which means before all those aspiring doctors, lawyers, Instagram influencers, felons can cross the stage, they need to listen to just one more person who's allegedly more experienced than them tell them just how valuable failure is. So we're opening the lines, because that's what everybody says in all those, for the rest of the show at 877-301-8970. Talk about the art of the commencement speech, or the art of surviving having to sit through one. If you sat through one that was great and you remember it, let us know. If you don't remember it or it was horrible, let us know that too. Trump used his time addressing the University of Alabama graduates the other day to continue, this is true, to lie about the 2020 election. That's what anybody would do at a commencement. Others typically focus on inspirational messages. Here's a clip of Ken Burns. This is 2016 at Marjorie's alma mater, Stanford.
Be for something. Be curious, not cool. Feed your soul, too, every day. Free yourself from the limitations of the binary world. It is just a tool, a means, not an end. Believe, as Arthur Miller told me in an interview for my very first film on the Brooklyn Bridge. Believe that maybe you too could add something that would last and be beautiful.
It's pretty good. Does anyone hold their commencement speech close to their hearts, carrying it with them through their adult lives? There's just one more hurdle to jump through before you get that damn diploma and some appetizers. And if you want to talk about your kids thing, if you yourself recently graduated, or if you graduated a while ago and you have a commencement memory, share it with us. 877-301-8970. I want to tell you how this show works.
How does it work, Jim?
We were having a meeting, our usual early morning meeting, to decide what to do. Every time I want to tell a story I've told before, what Marjorie says to me is, you've all heard this on the radio.
You've said it a million times.
Jim, you've said it a million times. Do we have to hear it again? When one of our colleagues says, let's talk about commencement addresses, Marjorie says, oh, I can tell the story about Gloria Stein speaking at my sister's graduation.
I don't think I've told it a million times.
You've told it a million times.
Okay.
But you know what?
What?
It's a fabulous story.
It's a
So why don't you start us off with this? Our number is 877-301-8970 for your best commencement address stories. What's yours, Marjorie?
So I'm kind of a teenager from Fall River. I wasn't really very informed about anything, including sex. So I get to my sister's high school graduation, college graduation, and Gloria Steinem comes on the stage.
Your father and mother are there.
Yeah, I got my straight-laced Irish Catholic father, gets down on his knees every night and says his prayers. The maiden lady aunts who's got the Pope's hat on the staircase in their house and rosary beads all around the beds. They got their matching brooches, the matching pants, the whole thing. Very maiden ladies, never marry. And I'm there, and Gloria Steinem, my mother's there too, but she was a musician, so she was different. Anyway, Gloria Steinem's there, really short, really tight mini skirt. She comes out on the stage, and she's got this really tight shirt on, and she's got the long hair and the big glasses, and she looks really sexy. I've never seen a sexy woman be such a woman of substance in those days. And she gets up and she talks about how, and this is a time when women couldn't get their own credit cards or anything like that. She talks about sex, that was the first thing. And she talks about, body parts, and that was the other thing. And she talks about all these things that women could do. And when she gets into the details about sex, I didn't want to look, my father down the 2 rows down, I could hear him.
Well, say the word. She mentioned orgasms, and that's what put your father over the edge.
Orgasms. I'm thinking, wow, what's that? That sounds good. I don't know what that is, but that sounds pretty good to me because I was, rather naive coming from Fall River. So that was my big. I'll never forget her speech. She was great.
877-301-8970. I have no idea who gave my commencement speech, so I can't tell a comparable story.
Here's a great one, though. You probably heard this one before, too, because it got such a lot of coverage. The Chicago Tribune columnist, Mary Schmidt, she remixed, reread, and set to music. This is when it's remixed, reread, and set to music by filmmaker Baz Luhrmann for his song "Everybody's Free." But listen to the words. This is what she said at a graduation.
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 99, wear sunscreen. If I could offer you only one tip for the future, sunscreen would be it. The long-term benefits of sunscreen have been proved by scientists, whereas the rest of my advice has no basis more reliable than my own meandering experience. I will dispense this advice now.
Okay, she also said sunscreen, and what was the second thing?
Dental floss.
Dental floss.
Dental floss.
Floss every night and wear your sunscreen. I thought that was great.
Now, can I tell my story that you didn't want me to tell?
Certainly, go ahead.
And we'll take your call soon at 877-301-8970. Anything about commencement speeches, yours, your siblings like Marjorie, your kids, etc. I have told the story about 500,000 times. Now, Marjorie, I'd like to start with a quiz. How many commencement speeches have I been asked to give?
You have given one, I believe,
One.
haven't you? Yeah,
Well, I've
very
given
good.
one because I've only been asked to give one.
You know who's given one this year? Latoya.
I saw
Latoya
that
Edwards
at
from
Framingham State.
Yeah,
I
she
know.
invited you.
There are a lot of great ones.
Yeah.
Jennifer Coolidge is
Jennifer
at
Coolidge
Emerson.
is at Emerson.
Linda
That's gonna
Henry from the Globe is at
Yeah.
Babson. Sully Sullivan, the great pilot, is at Endicott. There's some great ones. In any case, I am asked to give the commencement address at Fisher College, right off the Boston Common, and I was, to say the least, thrilled. And then there is a story that you've all read. Actually, it was in the paper in the Globe 2 or 3 days ago. Every year the Globe does a story, sort of a commencement roundup. Who are the big shots who are giving commencement speeches? And I don't know who it was the year. I did this about 10 years ago. Whoever it was, this celebrity, this politician, this whatever. And then they get to Fisher College, and they quote the president at the time. His name was McGovern. And they said, they asked him who he got. And here's what he says in the Boston Globe. We were hoping to get Scott Brown, but we settled for Jim Browdy. That's what it said.
Oh, okay.
And actually, I read that during my commencement address to the graduates at Fisher. But nevertheless, that was my shot. 877-301-8970. Ed in Middleborough, you were first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Thank you. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
We love that.
Thank you.
I wanted to share with you when I graduated from Bridgewater State College, before it was university, in 1976.
Yeah.
I believe our commencement speaker was the head of Perkins School for the Blind. And one thing she said, stayed with me all these years, is you can only sit in one seat at a time. It was very simple, but stayed with me.
Wow, that's a good one.
That actually is simple and great,
one.
Ed. Thanks.
Ed,
I can
thank you
understand
very
how it
much.
stayed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that call.
Joel in Connecticut says, I remember the recommendation by my commencement speaker to use the bus lane of life because you are worth it. That's so beautiful.
Okay. May I play another one that I really like?
No.
Why not?
Of course you can.
Okay. This is...
We'll get back to your calls in a second.
This is David Foster Wallace, the great writer. He gave the 205 Kenyon College commencement speech, later titled, This is Water. It's worth reading the whole thing. But here he is talking about the value of liberal arts education and what it means to be, quote, taught how to think, unquote.
That I think this is one part of what teaching me how to think is really supposed to mean, to be just a little less arrogant, to have just a little critical awareness about myself and my certainties, because a huge percentage of the stuff that I tend to be automatically certain of is, it turns out, totally wrong and deluded. I have learned this the hard way, as I predict you graduates will too.
Not bad.
He said that in 2005. He died in 2008. He only lived another 3 years.
Yeah, he never quite recovered from that speech. 877-301-8970. Before we get to the calls, you know what I thought was the most moving speech I'd ever heard? I wasn't there, but I heard it on the radio afterwards. What? Do you know, actually, she was at the Globe, GBH Media Summit last week, the great broadcaster, Ann Curry. Ann Curry gave this beautiful speech at Wheaton College here in Massachusetts. And I thought the most beautiful part of it was when she celebrated some of the most wonderful graduates of Wheaton College, like Reverend Billy Graham, the former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Dennis Hastert, Wes Craven, the great horror film maker. Did you ever hear that speech?
I did not, Jim.
Okay, there was a small problem, and this is true. While they did graduate from Wheaton College, they didn't graduate from the Wheaton College that she was speaking to. They graduated from the Wheaton College in Illinois that she was not speaking to.
That's awful.
Which is about, let me tell you something, if that happened to me, I would never come out of my house again.
Yeah,
so she's a stronger person than I.
That could happen to me, actually. That's
whatever.
kind of up my alley. Somebody said they heard Ted Kennedy in 1979, said Ted clearly had a couple, maybe 2 or 3 before the speech.
It's fine. He knows how to have fun.
That's
Daniel in Boston, you're next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking commencement speeches. Welcome.
Thank you. First-time caller, long-time listener. I don't know why you have to say that.
Yeah, I know. I don't know either, but you did. We're glad you did.
Here it is.
Go ahead.
So I was a commencement speaker. I went to school at 45 to get my master's in Chinese medicine.
In Chinese medicine?
Commencement speech. Yeah, I became an acupuncturist.
Wow.
And And so after 7 years, I get the master's. I'm up at the commencement at the podium, and all through school, I was a bartender to get through school. I get up the podium, and as I'm talking about the commencement speech, you're going to make choices in life. You're going to have to think quickly. Life doesn't wait for you. You've got to jump on it. I'm mixing my Manhattan, and I pour the Manhattan out to small little cocktail glasses and pass it out to the first row and tell them, here you go. You have to make a decision. Are you going to drink it? It's 10 o'clock in the morning. Is you not going to drink it? Is it organic? Not organic? Is it healthy for you? Not healthy for you? And make your decision. To you, I graduated for the class. I saluted them, drank my Manhattan, walked off the stage. It was great.
That is pretty excellent, I should say, Daniel. That's a good one. That'll be added to our list. Congratulations. That's pretty good to be invited back to your own school to give a graduation
It is pretty
thing.
neat. It is
Thank
pretty
you,
neat.
Daniel, for doing that. You know who's a local guy who was invited back to his own school to give his graduation address? I wish we had an excerpt because it was great.
Who?
Jimmy Tingle.
Oh, Jimmy Tingle.
Who graduated later in life from the Kennedy School. And he was invited back, and he gave I think the equivalent of the commencement address there. And I've heard it, and it was fabulous, by the way.
Okay. There's a lot of people reading me their graduation speeches, but I will try to get through
Reading?
as many as
What do you mean, their whole graduation
segments.
speech?
There's a lot of text on this. Jay in the car, thank you for calling.
Hello, Jay in the car.
Hey, Jim. This is Jay Rose. How are you?
Oh, my God. I've
Hi.
known Jay from legal services days when we were both boys. Jay, it's great to hear from you. What's up?
I just want to say this.
Oh, God. Jay, we got to put you on hold. Don't go away. Bad connection. Drive to another spot, and we'll get back to you after we talk to Donna in Nashua. Donna, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
We're good. Thanks for
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
A lot of those. Thanks.
Now, let's see if I can hear me?
Yeah,
Yep.
don't worry
Go
about
ahead.
that. I know
Go
it's
ahead.
backing up, but we
Hello?
hear you fine. I'm sorry
Yep,
about that.
go ahead. Okay. So I never attended any of my own graduations. I don't know how to turn off my radio.
Oh, well, that's a problem.
Okay. But
Yeah, go ahead.
my kids found this graduation thing online, and it was fabulous. And it's Peter Dinklage. He went back to
Game of
his
Thrones,
own college
obviously.
up in Burlington, Vermont. It was
Yeah.
Bennington College.
Yeah.
And that's where he graduated from acting. And he talked about coming into school wearing tights and a cape. That's how he arrived at college.
Oh,
and
God.
He was instantly accepted by everyone. And he got on stage like right off the bat. And now he meets people in New York who come up and talk to him and say they're acting students at New York University or one of the others. And he always congratulates them, but he feels bad for them because he knows they're never going to see a stage until their senior year or if that. And so he says now he's just going to tell people to drop out of school, get on a bus, go up and enroll in Bennington College.
That's pretty good.
That is a good one.
Hey, Donna, good first call. Thank you for sharing that. These are some excellent texts. The anonymous texter says, you should listen to this, Marjorie. This is great because I wish you had spoken to this person earlier. Paul Weiss spoke at my graduation. He said, quote, you cannot be one person when you're actually two.
Okay.
Even more so when you're dead.
We're getting a lot of mileage about
Yeah.
that because I thought Paul Weiss was the name of the guy who ran the law firm.
Okay,
In
here's
fact,
another
he was
one.
Neither.
Okay, anonymous texter. My sister listened to a finance CEO at graduation talk about business ethics at her college graduation on a Saturday. The following Thursday, he was charged and later convicted for multiple crimes regarding the management of his company.
Oh, text back and tell us who that was.
And
We
one
might
more,
be famous.
Scott
I saw
Brown.
This one.
Scott Brown was my daughter's commencement speaker at LaSalle University in Newton. He was terrible. Fisher College was lucky to have you, Jim. No disrespect, Senator Brown. That was the
Yeah,
texter.
somebody
it was
else
not
said
me.
they would have much preferred you over Scott Brown. So isn't that nice?
How come you're not? Why are we not invited to? Aren't we leaders in the community?
I don't know, Jim.
Obviously
Apparently
not.
Apparently not.
My
John
commencement-
Lewis spoke at Framingham State for his son's graduation right before he died. Bill Cosby, before he was disgraced, was at Boston College. Remember that?
No.
Christine
I'm sure he
Emanuel,
spoke at
URI.
UMass graduation.
Jack Williams was at Worcester State. And the
Channel 4.
texter said that he was absolutely fantastic. He was an anchorman for years on Channel
Yes,
4
he
with Liz
was.
Walker.
With Liz Walker,
that we
who
had
was
on
here last week.
Steve Jobs gave a great graduation speech at Stanford to George Saunders, the novelist and short story writer, he gave a great graduation speech. Where did he give it? He talked about kindness, that people needed to be kinder to each other.
Can we play one more before we try Jay on the
Sure.
car again? Here is Toni Morrison, obviously writer Toni Morrison's commencement address to Wellesley. I wonder if Callie was there, class of 2004. Here it is.
What is now known is not all what you are capable of knowing. You are your own stories, and therefore free to imagine and experience what it means to be human without wealth, what it feels like to be human without domination over others. And although you don't have complete control over the narrative, no author does, I can tell you, you can nevertheless create it.
That's a good one.
That's pretty great.
I remember there was a big contretemps when Barbara Bush was going to speak at Wellesley College because she was only the first lady, and why should just the first lady speak? But she came to speak anyway, and she was great.
By the way, John and Beverly, I think he got the wrong college, but the gist of this comes through. Endicott College still refers to Jim as Professor Ambien. Thank you. I actually taught at Babson, not Endicott, but that's close enough.
Conan O'Brien gave a commencement speech at Harvard in 2000. Apparently that was terrific.
He's a Harvard grad, is he not, I think?
Yeah.
Let's go to Jay in a car. Jay, this is Jay, my former legal services colleague. Let's try you one more time, Jay. What's up?
Hi, Jay.
Okay, so
Perfect.
I graduated college in 1975 from Binghamton, and it was the commencement was a couple of weeks after the end of the Vietnam War, right, which you just celebrated April 30th, May 1st. So this was a couple of weeks later. The valedictorian gives a speech, and in his speech he says, Mazel tov to the victorious Vietnamese. He gives them credit for beating the imperialist United States. Someone sitting right behind me stands up and says, "You communists!" And then in the seat behind him, someone else stands up and says, "That's no communist. That's my son," and jumps on the guy, and they start fighting.
Oh, no.
That's the kind of graduation I would like. Where was this,
That's
Jay?
a good one.
Binghamton, State University of New York at Binghamton.
SUNY. Hey, Jay, it's great to hear from you. That's a great story. Call us again. I hope you're well. Really nice to hear your voice. Thanks, Jay.
My daughter attended the 2022 Mass Art graduation since her year did not have an in-person graduation during the pandemic.
That was horrible.
That's the year Jared Bowen was awarded an honorary degree, and he was a wonderful speaker. There's Jared over there on
We're
Zoom.
talking to him in a second.
We'll have to tell him. Remember the Wellesley High graduation where David McCullough Jr., the son of the great historian, who was a teacher at Wellesley College, gave a graduation speech where he said, "You're not special," and the you-know-what hit the fan.
We had him on. Do you remember that?
That's right.
Yeah, we did.
Oh.
And we had David, his father, on, too, who was one of the greats ever. The car guys talk guys at MIT. That was a great one. Can you imagine the car talk guys doing a
there would be
graduation
an absolute riot.
Oh, my God.
Kermit the Frog is speaking at the University of Maryland on May 21st.
I think I've heard that.
Yeah,
I think that's right.
I'm sure the graduates will remember it forever, says a texter.
Let's go to David in Boston. David, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, Jim, and hello, Marjorie.
Hi.
Long time no speak.
Well, it's good to talk to you.
Thank you for calling.
My pleasure. I would like to say that I'm a proud graduate of Emerson College, class of 73.
Good.
Or as I call it, the class of Leno.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Our commencement speaker was an obscure writer named Gene Roddenberry, who'd been a Los Angeles police officer, wrote for the show Have Gun Will Travel, and created Star Trek.
Wow.
And I remember very distinctly, he said he has seen plans, this is 1973, that would make today's television look like a Conestoga wagon next to an SST plane. And so the point is, we still have television, but it changes. And if you're going to be in it, you had best realize the changes and go with it rather than holding on to what we used to do. It's a difference between a windshield and a rear view mirror. The last is my own particular metaphor.
It's a good metaphor to add. David, thank you for the call. We really appreciate it. Who spoke at your graduation at Stanford?
Carla Hill. She was
Secretary
the head
of something.
Housing Urban Development.
Development, yeah.
I
How was
remember-
she? Fabulous?
It was like so hot. We were in the sun. It was like 90 degrees. I don't remember anything she said.
Okay, good.
But listen to this one. Graduated from BU in 1992. Mr. Rogers spoke. It was beautiful. We all sang, Won't You Be My Neighbor? We all need some Mr. Rogering right now.
Did you happen to see CNN the night that Trump said he wants to get rid of funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting? One of the shows on CNN played the testimony of Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, before a Senate committee, and I wish I knew what the name of the senator was. Is it fair to say the senator was so blown away by Rogers? He said, you just won the funding or won the battle.
Yeah.
And Rogers, he just told these beautiful stories. Then he recited a song that he had written, Rogers had written for his show that was just such a beautiful, beautiful moment.
into increasing your confidence in young kids and telling you you're a good person and people love you and people like you, and that's a big deal.
Let's squeeze one more in. Jim in Worcester, you got a minute. Take it away. Hi.
Hi. Second-time caller, obsessive listener.
Thank you.
I graduated from Brandeis University in 1989.
Yep.
And my commencement speaker was E.L. Doctorow, who wrote Ragtime.
Oh, my God.
Oh, gosh.
And he was great, but he started out in such a frenzy because that year at BU, Mitterrand and Bush the First were speaking at their commencement, and people were scalping tickets, and he was wondering if anyone was paying attention. He goes into this huge frenzy, and then he looks down at all of us from the stage, and he says, "We've been waiting for you." Do you know that?
Ooh.
We've been waiting for you.
Oh, my God.
That's a really good
And
one.
it stuck with me for the rest of my life.
That gives me chills. By the way, John Silber was president of BU then and made national headlines because he said Mitterrand, who was the president of France, and it was Bush the First, you said, right, Jim?
Yep.
HW were both speaking at the commencement. That is a beautiful story. Jim, thanks for sharing it. We
Can we
appreciate
squeeze
it.
in comedian Charlie Day?
Very quickly.
Marymount College commencement 2014. Here is Charlie Day.
I know I will be judged by all those who care to watch on YouTube and compared, but my lesson is this. I don't give a shit. Okay? Now listen up. You cannot let a fear of failure or a fear of comparison or a fear of judgment stop you from doing what's going to make you great. You cannot succeed without this risk of failure. You cannot have a voice without the risk of criticism. And you cannot love without the risk of loss.
Shut up. I mean, what was the point of that? It's another one of those failure things. That's what everybody does in every speech.
Very good. You must go out and take these risks.
Oh,
how he ended. I thought that was very inspirational.
It's the oldest
Jim.
speech in the world.
Oldest speech in the world.
Okay, now, Jared, I'm afraid to ask you this based upon that caller who said you were their speaker somewhere. How many commencement addresses have you given?
I have not given any. In fact, I didn't speak at that one, I think, where they said that.
They said you were the greatest thing they'd ever heard.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I'm happy to take that.
You
but
were
I'm-
to get an honorary degree.
Oh, he just texted. He meant Jared Kushner, not Jared Bowen. I'm so sorry.
No, that was the best part. I got the degree, and then I didn't have to speak. It was so nice.
Okay, I'm
They
going to go
said nice
back and
things
look at
about
who's
me.
that. Which school was that?
That was Mass Art.
Mass Art. Okay, they said you gave a great speech. Okay, there you go.
But let's be clear. You would have given a great speech had you been asked to give one.
I have such a fear of public speaking. Maybe I didn't just blacked out after.
Exactly. What are you doing at, what do you call it, 2 o'clock?
We're going to be speaking with Keith Lockhart about his
great.
30th anniversary season with the Boston Pops, kicking off with Jaws concerts this weekend. And then we're speaking with Amari Paris Jeffries about Letter from a Birmingham Jail. There are a lot of people looking at what Martin Luther King Jr. wrote in that piece and how that reads today. And then we will talk about an art magazine that is gaining a lot of traction, and it is the brainchild of Jameson Johnson, who started this as a student and has just poured everything she has into it, and it's pretty fantastic.
By the way, they had a big event on Saturday night, and my younger daughter was one of the bartenders. Were you there?
I was not there, unfortunately.
Oh, because
but
she
their
loves
events are
you.
great parties.
She said it was a fabulous party, and she would have had a stroke had you been there. So, in any case, Jared, it's good to see you. We'll be listening at 2.
Good to see you.
And by the way, Keith, who is just one of the great assets of this city ever, the 30th anniversary, he will be with us on Tuesday. And Marjorie, who is emceeing the special 30th anniversary celebration of Keith Lockhart.
You and I.
You and I
know.
are. We're
Very
really
excited about it.
Yeah, that's coming up.
Thanks, Jared. Tomorrow, we'll be back here at the Boston Public Library with GBH's Jared Bowen. We just spoke with him. Harvard national security expert Juliet Kinem. Chefs Anna Sortun.
Oleana.
That's right. And Maura Kilpatrick for another edition of How Do You Two Know Each Other? From Sofra. I haven't said it yet. For another edition of How Do You Know Each Other?
How do they know each other?
NPR host Ari Shapiro had 2 live shows in Lexington and Nashua, New Hampshire. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Comley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Our engineer is John LaClaw Parker. Our executive producer, Jane Bologna. Thanks to our BPL staff, Maddie Geyer, Patrick Lally, Juan Jose Cadena, our host at the Newsfeed Cafe, and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. The Culture Show with Jared Bowen is right after us. And listen to this one. Navy SEAL William McCraven's 2014 graduation address. I don't know where it was at. If you want to change the world, start by making your bed. That was sent to us by Rebecca in Florida. Just the whole speech is worth listening to. I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browning.
Thanks again for tuning in. Hope you can tune in tomorrow and have a great day.
Bye.